Chapter 163, Tender Killing. Roaring filled the cauldron. Lightning danced about, and the meat jelly seemed frightened, its attention now fixed upon Meng Hao and the others. Han Bei's voice rang out. I shall employ my bloodline magic. Brother Meng and Zai dear, please assist me with all your power. She bit her tongue, spitting blood onto the strands winding into the statue's crack, which began to glow red. A droning roar sounded, and the statue trembled. Vast dust poured off it. Meng Hao felt the strand pulling at his cultivation base and spiritual sense. His eyes flickered, but his face remained still. Zai Jai's eyes glittered as he poured power into his strand. He looked at Meng Hao, killing intent flickering in his eyes. Then his gaze shifted to Han Bei, growing warm. They were childhood sweethearts, a green plum and a bamboo horse. Though there had been conflict when young, Han Bei had clearly worked her way into his heart. The roaring grew in intensity. Han Bei's face grew pale. She controlled the three threads while Zai Jai and Meng Hao provided assisting power. They had no way to act. They poured their power in while Han Bei used her bloodline magic. Only she could touch the statue's spirit. If anyone else tried, their cultivation base would wither. It was something neither Meng Hao nor Zai Jai could do. About 10 breaths passed. Booming filled the sky. The kneeling statue emitted a roar as its eyes began to shine, as if alive. Its body slowly quivered, preparing to stand. Han Bei's face grew paler, her eyes brighter. She spat blood, causing her blood chi to enter the statue. The statue trembled violently, as if shaken by an earthquake. Then the massive statue stood up. Its eyes emitted a dull glow, and mysterious pressure filled the entire area. It slowly lowered its hands, and the images burned indelibly into Meng Hao's memory. He took a deep breath, continuing to provide power and spiritual sense. Han Bei's body shook, real trembling, not an act. Her face was as pale as a corpse's, but determination radiated from her eyes as she spat more blood. Boom! The statue slowly outstretched its right hand, pointing with its index finger. The finger seemed filled with indescribable power as it descended toward the circular cauldron in the middle. Meng Hao's eyes narrowed and gleamed mysteriously. I need more power. Han Bei's voice was urgent. Zai Jai poured more power into his strand without hesitation. Meng Hao's eyes shined as he did the same. Color returned to Han Bei's face, but moments later she spat more blood, filling the statue with more power. Its finger continued to approach the cauldron. It seemed about to open. But the descending finger suddenly changed directions. It no longer headed toward the cauldron, but toward Zai Jai, moving with incredible speed. Han Bei, what are you doing? Cried Zai Jai, throwing the strand away. His eyes filled with terror as he shot backward. Meng Hao's eyes flickered. He opened his mouth and lightning mist flew out, preventing Zai Jai from moving. His words were still echoing as the massive finger reached him. The finger barely touched him and his entire body exploded, even his Tao pillar. In an instant, everything disintegrated. His life was gone. He didn't scream, only let out a furious roar that lingered after his death. An orange strand curled up where his body was, entering the statue's finger. His bag of holding rose up and flew to Han Bei. She grabbed it and produced a small black vial. She crushed it, and a phantom figure floated up that looked exactly like Han Bei. She absorbed it through her ears, mouth, and nose. All of this happened in only a few breaths. Meng Hao watched everything with the same expression as always, as if expecting it. He was completely expressionless, though his eyes flickered. Many thanks for your assistance, fellow Taoist Meng, said Han Bei with a sweet smile, bowing slightly. Fellow Taoist Han, it was a clever move to exterminate your dear Zai, he said coolly. He wasn't surprised. The violet feng shui compass she had given him contained a message. In the message, she had directly told him that she planned to kill Zai Jai, and when it happened, he shouldn't be alarmed. When the Black Civ sect captured me and my clansmen, they seemed to treat us well, but in actuality we were nothing more than animals in a cage. Zai Jai was the worst. He treated me horribly since childhood. After we grew up, he had further desires. It's only natural to slay him. If I hadn't, everything we acquired today would belong to the sect. Now we can share it. She smiled at him. Brother Meng is surpassingly astute. I don't dare deceive you. That is why I left the message on the compass. I always accomplish what I set out to do. Today, the time refinement technique becomes ours. From now on, you need do nothing more. Her expression was sincere, though she sighed inwardly. Of the 6 who began the mission, all had their own thoughts and plans. Only Meng Hao had seen through everything and come through it all. People had fallen around him, but he remained unscathed. Fear and admiration grew in Han Bei's heart. Had any mistakes been made, Meng Hao would have been dead. She was subconsciously afraid of provoking him. Therefore, her words were true and revealed her true intentions. Meng Hao's expression remained the same. He simply nodded, though lightning mist surrounded him. If Han Bei threatened him, he would call down the lightning. Death would be assured. Han Bei took a deep breath and looked at him. She abandoned any last scheming. The journey had been difficult and she had used up all her tricks. She didn't want more mishaps. Her hand flickered an incantation, and the statue shook, reaching back toward the circular cauldron. When it touched it, the entire world shook. The circular cauldron's lid slowly tilted up, and violet qi poured out. Inside, Meng Hao caught a glimpse of 3 jade pages floating up, their appearance coinciding with the violet qi. They hadn't completely emerged, as if they might sink back in. Han Bei's eyes glowed brightly and she gasped. Her hand slapped her bag of holding, and a small clay jar appeared, about the size of a head. It flew up, transforming into a beam that shot toward the cauldron. As it neared, cracks spread across its surface and it exploded, sending ash forward. Within the ash were 10 phantom images, men and women of varying ages, all resembling each other. These must be Han clan members. This wasn't random ash. It was collected from various Han clan cremations and contained life force. The figures spread out and bowed respectfully toward the cauldron. Bloodline of Patriarch Han, according to the ancient agreement, the bloodline remains. Patriarch, please return. The phantoms entered the violet qi. The Han Patriarch statue stretched out its palm and pressed it against the cauldron. The figures entered and the statue pressed the cauldron. It vibrated, emitting a droning sound. The phantom figures burned. The statue trembled violently. Starting at its feet, cracks spread across its entire body and it began to collapse. From this day forward, only 8 statues remained. Han Bei shook as if rocked by invisible power. She took a few steps back and spit blood. At the same time, a violet glow flew from the crumbling statue. Meng Hao saw the excitement in her eyes. Within the glow was a small, sleeping person. It shot toward Han Bei, hitting her between the eyebrows and merging into her. That's what she came for, thought Meng Hao, his eyes narrowing. Because of the phantom sacrifice, the 3 jade pages freed themselves from the cauldron and flew out. A sigh sounded from the cauldron. One flying page suddenly stopped and spun backward. The other 2 continued forward. Chapter 164, That Bird's Aura. Violet light glowed between Han Bei's eyebrows. Panting, she shot into the air after one page. Meng Hao leaped after the other, moving as fast as he could. They flew up simultaneously in different directions, dodging lightning in pursuit. Just as each was about to lay hands on their page, the meat jelly sprang into action. Its movement caused Meng Hao's expression to flicker and Han Bei's face to fall. Both were filled with fear. The object wasn't dangerous, but it seemed to enjoy jumping onto people's heads and consuming lightning. Its arrival heralded a sea of lightning. Damn it! Meng Hao's eyes narrowed as he saw it heading toward him. Han Bei, moving in a different direction, breathed a sigh of relief. Meng Hao grabbed the jade page and shot backward as fast as possible, keeping his eye on the meat jelly. He withdrew the lightning mist. It threatened others but would only attract the meat jelly and more lightning. Unfortunately, he had acted too slowly. He shot backward as fast as possible, but the meat jelly was clearly persistent. In a flash, it was in front of him, shooting downward to land on his head. Before it could, the meat jelly trembled. The old man's face appeared, eyes wide open, disbelief and disgust on his expression. It opened its mouth and spoke. Damn it, how come you have that damn bird's aura on you? It hopped backward, completely disgusted, refusing to come near. It flew back up and vomited as if having seen something unbearably disgusting. But then it suddenly appeared in front of Han Bei. She watched in shock as it gulped down the jade page in a single bite. It chewed and Han Bei's scalp grew numb. She moved backward. Gross, said the face, expression twisted as it looked at Meng Hao, clearly scared to come near. Meng Hao had a strange expression as he looked at the retreating meat jelly. He glanced at horrified Han Bei. She was silent for a moment, then said, Congratulations on acquiring the Han clan's time refining technique, fellow Taoist Meng. There are 3 pages total, but each has a technique that can be used separately. A complicated look appeared in her eye. Suddenly, the lightning began to roar. The intensity increased rapidly, each bolt fierce as those at the beginning. The hour had passed. Without lightning-repelling objects, death was certain. The sheets of lightning made Meng Hao's expression fall. Han Bei looked shocked. You acquired it, so it's yours, brother Meng, said Han Bei hurriedly. I claim no part of it, but please take care of it well and don't lose it. Next time we meet, you must give me a copy. That was our agreement." She slapped her bag of holding. A violet feng shui compass appeared. It flashed and her body disappeared. In that instant, the meat jelly shot forward, borrowing the teleportation power to also leave the cauldron. Meng Hao looked around at the fields of lightning and immediately pulled out the violet feng shui compass. He poured spiritual sense into it, activating its power. In an instant, he was teleported away. When he reappeared, the sky was dark and the earth trembled. Booms echoed everywhere and his Tao pillars became unstable. He coughed up blood and staggered forward a few paces. He looked around. He was in the wide plain, not far from where he had met Han Bei initially. Han Bei hadn't lied. The compass did what she said. He lifted his hand, which held the good luck charm. He was about to pour spiritual sense into it and leave, when suddenly a massive tower began to rise from the earth in the distance. Everything shook and roaring filled the air. This pillar was like a tower, emanating an aura, not of core formation or nascent soul, but of foundation establishment. This was the 100 Spirits Tower, constructed with the Tao pillars of over 200 foundation establishment cultivators. Meng Hao sucked in a deep breath when he saw the 100 Spirits Tower. Surrounding it were phantom figures of hundreds of cultivators emitting shrill howls that merged into a powerful sound of grievance. The sound rose into the heavens. From various directions, about 10 freshly acquired Tao pillars flew toward the tower and melded into it. The power spreading intensified. The rest of the rogue foundation establishment cultivators who came here must all be dead. He was silent, struck by the Black Civ sect's plotting. His Tao pillars trembled. If they were perfect, he couldn't keep them under control. "I can't stay here any longer," he thought. But then he cocked his head and stared into the distance. His eyes glittered and he decided not to leave. Instead, he flew off. He flew for about 10 breaths before stopping. Below him in the plain, he saw a group of 4 cultivators sitting cross-legged in meditation. A protective spell circled them, resisting the tower's power. One of them was none other than Lu Tao. Meng Hao watched as one of the 4 coughed up blood. His body exploded, and an illusory Tao pillar flew into the sky. Another cultivator trembled. His eyes opened and he stared at Lu Tao. "You despicable!" Before he could finish, his body was torn to pieces as his Tao pillar flew out. The third's face grew pale as his body was torn to shreds. His Tao pillar flew into the distance. The death of these 3 made the protective spell many times stronger. Lu Tao sat inside pale-faced, gritting his teeth. The spell was the only thing resisting the gravitational force outside. Meng Hao could see clearly that the 3 had been under Lu Tao's control. Their Tao pillars had been blood sacrifices to protect him. Their deaths had simply strengthened his spell. Meng Hao descended toward Lu Tao and landed next to the spell. He looked down at him and gave a dry cough. Lu Tao trembled. When he opened his eyes and gazed upon Meng Hao, shock covered his face. "So it's fellow Taoist Meng." His face was pale, his voice anxious. "Nice spell," said Meng Hao coolly. His words caused Lu Tao extreme alarm. Meng Hao seemed unaffected by the gravitational force. "Fellow Taoist Meng, what do you want?" His heart was filled with anxiety. If Meng Hao interfered, the spell would break. His body would shatter and his Tao pillars would fly into the sky to join all the others in the tower. "Tell me what the thunderclap leaf really does," Meng Hao said calmly. "I already told you, fellow Taoist Meng," he blurted. "The thunderclap leaf." Before continuing, Meng Hao reached out and pushed down on the spell around Lu Tao. The spell trembled and a small crack appeared. Terror flashed on Lu Tao's face. "Stop, fellow Taoist Meng, please. I'm not deceiving you. The thunderclap leaf really can." Meng Hao gave a cold snort and pushed down again. A boom sounded and 7 or 8 more cracks appeared. Lu Tao felt more gravitational force seeping inside. His Tao pillar trembled unstably. His scalp went numb. He was scared out of his wits. "Thunderclap leaves are rare in the southern domain," he gushed, talking as fast as he could. "Special techniques imbue them into magical items to increase lightning power. Fellow Taoist Meng, listen to me. I have a jade slip as evidence. Just read the technique and you'll receive enlightenment." He produced a jade slip and showed it to Meng Hao. His entire body trembled, entreaty on his face. His words sounded sincere. "Still trying to fool me?" Cold light gleamed in Meng Hao's eye. His index finger stabbed into the spell. A boom rippled out as more cracks filled it. A wide hole appeared. Gravitational force poured in. Lu Tao's face twisted and he coughed up blood. His body looked ready to explode. This chapter was sponsored by William Porter. Chapter 165. Sivnet Thunder Tree. Stop, shrieked Lu Tao. His face drained of blood and death's shadow loomed over him. He remembered when he had entered how many cultivators had exploded, their Tao pillars sucked away. He was from the Black Lands and knew a secret method to stay safe. But with Meng Hao here, he felt incredible pressure he'd never felt before. No matter what he said, Meng Hao wouldn't believe him. Meng Hao had the upper hand. Faced with life-or-death danger, Lu Tao's schemes dissolved like ash. "I'm telling the truth," said Lu Tao pleadingly. "Thunderclap leaves can be absorbed into magical treasures to imbue them with lightning power. Why don't you believe me?" His voice was hoarse, pushed to the limit. His eyes flashed with understanding. He gave a hoarse laugh, boldness born of desperation filling them. "I get it. You want to kill me. Fine, just shatter my spell. I've already explained the Thunderclap Leaf's usage. If you're going to kill me, just kill me. But you can forget about getting information from my Jade slip." Gritting his teeth, Lu Tao pushed down hard on it. He would crush it. If the fish died and the net was torn, everyone would lose. Meng Hao looked calmly at Lu Tao. After a moment he sighed. He lifted his hand and pushed down. A boom sounded. What was destroyed was not the spell but the Jade slip in Lu Tao's hand. He destroyed it, transforming it into ash. Lu Tao's face fell and his heart grew cold. Obviously, Meng Hao didn't believe him. "Tell me or don't tell me. I'm out of patience," he said coolly. He believed Lu Tao's words about Thunderclap leaves imbuing treasures with lightning power, but Lu Tao had spoken too easily. Meng Hao couldn't imagine that Patriarch Reliance's Thunderclap leaves would be so simple. A bitter smile appeared on Lu Tao's face. Meng Hao nodded slightly, then began to press down onto the spell. This time he would completely destroy it. "I'll tell." Lu Tao's body trembled, his heart nearly collapsing. The shaking of his Tao pillar turned into resolve in his eyes. "I'll tell you," he said, quivering, "but you have to swear you won't damage my spell." Everything he'd said before was half-truths, none touching the real truth. Facing death now, he had no choice but to be honest. "Speak," said Meng Hao, his expression the same as ever but his eyes shining mysteriously. Lu Tao took a deep breath, silent for a moment. Then, with a pained look, he slowly began to speak. "Thunderclap leaves come from the Thunderclap tree, but its real name is Sivnet Thunder or Mulberry Thunder Tree." Meng Hao's expression was placid and revealing nothing. He looked coolly at Lu Tao, filling him with indescribable terror. His anguished expression grew stronger, and coldness encompassed his heart. He trembled with fear. "There's a legend about the Mulberry Thunder Tree. In ancient times, an almighty being achieved enlightenment sitting underneath a Sivnet Thunder Tree. Heavenly tribulation descended, desiring to wipe out this new Tao. The lightning's will infected the tree. The almighty being split apart the tribulation lightning and stepped into the stars. Though the almighty being departed, the tree absorbed some of its Tao and the tribulation lightning's power. It was destroyed, and yet 1,000 years later, a sprout appeared in the dead trunk. Thus was born a tree that was mulberry but not mulberry, thunder but not thunder, a Sivnet Mulberry Thunder Tree." Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he listened to Lu Tao, but he said nothing. The almighty being who achieved enlightenment underneath the tree said that if he could not achieve ultimate supremacy, he would rather his body shatter and stay beneath the tree for eternity. Lu Tao lowered his head as he spoke. A strange expression appeared on Meng Hao's face. It seemed unlikely that Lu Tao was making this up. Countless ages have passed since the tree appeared. It became part of the earth's heart, causing more trees to sprout. They contained experiences from ancient times. Because the will of the heavens evolved, the tree eventually cast off what withered it. Today, it is as precious as phoenix feathers and killin horns. Lu Tao was silent for a moment before continuing. Most cultivators use the tree to meld it with magical items or absorb it into their Tao pillars, acquiring the invincible thunder within the Sivnet Mulberry Thunder leaf. In the Black Lands, there is a type of larva called frigid snow, existing in midwinter snowstorms. Ranked 97 among remarkable bugs, it produces no silk but intense coldness. Cultivators prize it, and if acquired, view it as precious. It can be refined into a frigid spirit, embodied into a frigid treasure. This larva is not common but not exceedingly rare, and occasionally appears. Lu Tao paused for a moment and looked at Meng Hao. Meng Hao looked back and their gazes locked. Lu Tao sighed inwardly and continued. "What few know is that there is an unusual relationship between the larva and the tree. If the larva consumes the leaves, it can become the number 4 ranked remarkable bug, the eyeless larva. The eyeless larva turns into a chrysalis and produces a thread of silk. That thread cannot be broken, nor can the body be destroyed. It creates an unstoppable cycle. The thread becomes an invincible treasure. The eyeless larva has only appeared twice throughout history, and each time the thread caused a sensation in the cultivation world. There was even conflict in the eastern lands. To this day, no one knows what caused the death of the eyeless larvae that appeared before. Lu Tao sighed inwardly. Having finished, he looked deeply at Meng Hao, then closed his eyes. Meng Hao muttered to himself as he looked at Lu Tao. Finally, he laughed. His body transformed into a prismatic beam and shot off into the distance. After Meng Hao left, Lu Tao opened his eyes and looked blankly up at the sky, then let out a long sigh. His eyes filled with a cold glow. Everything I said now was 90% true and 10% false. That guy might be smart, but he'll have a hard time telling which is which. He'll definitely look for the frigid snow larva. If he feeds it the sieve net thunder mulberry leaf, he's dead. All I have to do now is endure this pain until the black sieve sect finishes. Then I'll find clues to what I'm looking for. Grim-faced, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes to repair his spell. Meng Hao flew through the air, lost in thought. Of course he wouldn't believe everything Lu Tao told him, but at least some was likely true. It would be too difficult to make up such a story on the spot. Perhaps half was true and half were lies. With desire comes incompleteness. If I have no desire, the storms will not touch me. Meng Hao smiled as he continued. Everything around was barren. The 100 Spirits Tower emitted a bright glow ahead. Meng Hao couldn't spot Su Qing among the crowd. He took out the good luck charm and poured spiritual energy into it. He felt the teleportation power but couldn't teleport immediately. It required time to activate. Meng Hao shot toward a nearby mountain peak and sat cross-legged. He continued to pour spiritual energy into it, feeling the power grow. I need to wait for the time it takes half an incense stick to burn. His first time using the charm meant encountering its downside for the first time. His location wasn't safe, but there were no people around, only the glow from the tower. His perfect foundation could still resist it. If too much time passed, it would become difficult. Therefore, he concentrated fully on the charm. I wonder where I'll be teleported to. His eyes flickered as the teleportation power surged. He placed his right hand on the ground. The dirt churned, and tentacles burst up. They transformed into a violet golden fruit the size of a palm. Meng Hao closed his fingers over it and placed it into his bag. At that moment, something flickered near the tower. It wasn't large, but Meng Hao immediately recognized it. It was the meat jelly. It floated in midair, gazing curiously at the tower. Suddenly, it emitted a piercing howl that filled heaven and earth. Wind and clouds surged, the ground shook, the tower trembled. The hundreds of phantoms began to shriek, lightning building on their bodies. Nearly 1,000 Black Civ sect disciples sat cross-legged at the tower's base. 8 core formation cultivators were in the forefront. When the meat jelly appeared, their eyes opened and looked up. It's appeared. That thing is ultimate vexation. Excitement filled their eyes as their hands flickered incantations. The ground glowed, and Patriarch Violet Civ and a beautiful middle-aged woman appeared. Nascent soul cultivators. So it was fished out. I shall acquire this item today, cried Patriarch Violet Civ. His eyes shined with intense expectation. Chapter 166, Ultimate Vexation Bonds a Master. According to ancient records, this is ultimate vexation, said Patriarch Violet Civ. It will never bond a master, loves thunder and consumes lightning. However, what excites it most is not lightning, but the electricity within the human body. The electricity contained within the Tao pillars of hundreds of cultivators, as well as the power of their cultivation bases, has been combined into the 100 Spirits Tower. This thing has never encountered such immense, intangible aura as that which emanates from this tower. He stared at the meat jelly, which was currently backing away slowly. Next to him, the beautiful woman stared at the meat jelly. Both rotated their cultivation bases, ready to spring into action at any moment. Patriarch Violet Civ used divine sense to communicate with the woman. Wait a bit longer. This thing is fast, and if it flees, even a sect patriarch couldn't capture it alive. It has an incredible aura and if captured, may detonate itself to wait for reincarnation. If that happens, who knows how many thousands of years before it reappears. We must wait for it to consume the 100 Spirits Tower. Inside is a seal, which, combined with magic cast by the 3 patriarchs on the outside, will strip it of its power of self-detonation. Then, the 2 of us will be able to capture it alive. Meng Hao's brow furrowed as he looked at the meat jelly. It was a very inauspicious item. Inside the cauldron, it had caused the death of several people. It had even spoken, which left Meng Hao with a strange feeling. He really disliked it. So that thing is what the Black Civ sect came for. He was lost in thought for about 10 breaths. The charm was almost activated. Meng Hao's expression was calm as he observed. In his heart, he was ready to leave at any moment. The meat jelly let out another menacing howl. The tower trembled as if about to collapse. Electricity sparked off it, along with a fatally enticing aura cultivators couldn't sense, but the meat jelly could. Its nose twitched and its eyes grew wide. Patriarch Violet Civ watched excitedly as it shot forward, approaching the tower. Its mouth opened and it took a giant bite. As it took more bites, the magical face on the meat jelly looked increasingly happy. It even emitted contented humming sounds. Soon the tower was more than half consumed. Suddenly, what remained exploded. A boom resonated as the tower collapsed and shot toward the meat jelly. It was clearly frightened. The crumbling tower transformed into an enormous chain that moved with incredible speed, encircling it. The meat jelly let out a frightened screech. It tried to hop backward but couldn't, as if being held down. At that moment, outside the blessed land, next to the black door, the statue began to emanate a mysterious glow. 3 figures sat cross-legged on the ragged hide, controlling it. Ear-splitting shrieks filled the air. Meng Hao looked at the meat jelly bound by the chain. The magical face looked panicked. It wanted to flee but was held tight. As it tried to jump away, the chain stretched back like a long tail. Patriarch Violet Civ's eyes flashed. He took a step forward and disappeared, reappearing next to the meat jelly. He lifted his hand to grab it. Simultaneously, the beautiful woman moved, appearing on the other side. Fear intensified on the meat jelly's magical face, and it let out a miserable cry. Its body shook and lightning crackled off it in waves. Heaven and earth shook. Patriarch Violet Civ's face flickered and he retreated a pace. The woman's eyes narrowed and she too retreated. The chained meat jelly rushed forward, its face filled with helplessness and despair. With the chain restricting it, it couldn't move fast. Behind it, Patriarch Violet Civ's eyes gleamed, and he let out a cold harumph. "You can't escape," he said, his voice filling the air. "Today, the Black Civ sect has come for you." He stepped forward, reaching his hand out. The woman gave a cold snort and lifted her hand. Her body seemed surrounded by stars, transforming into a multicolored beam that shot to surround the meat jelly on all sides. The meat jelly quivered and flew forward. The magical face spoke, its voice archaic. "You people can't do this." Shock filled the faces of the surrounding disciples. They'd never imagined this object could speak with a human voice. "So, you truly are ultimate vexation," said Patriarch Violet Civ, laughing. He shot forward along with the woman. Their eyes glowed mysteriously as their bodies transformed into beams of light surrounding the meat jelly. But next, the 8-core formation cultivators all let out a shout. The rest began to chant a scripture. Far away in the southern domain, tens of thousands of Black Civ sect cultivators sat cross-legged, chanting. Above the 10,000 mountains, an enormous vortex circulated. It sucked in the scriptures and transmitted them into the blessed land via the 1,000 cultivators there. The power caused everything to shake and tremble. Concern appeared on the meat jelly's magical face. "You people are immoral. You should be converting that bird, not me." Its voice sounded frightened and it shrieked. A huge bluish aura suddenly emanated off it. The meat jelly shot forward screaming, its expression desperate. At that moment, a massive roaring sound filled the sky. An enormous cage appeared above. It was composed of pitch-black iron bars inscribed with countless magical sealing symbols. It emanated shocking pressure that caused fissures in the earth below. The cage glittered as it shot toward the meat jelly to capture it alive. A black aura emanated from the bars, within which were countless faces filled with excited avarice. All of this happened in an instant. Meng Hao, not very close, was still shaken. The charm was almost ready to activate. Although everything was shocking, he focused mostly on getting away. But suddenly, he leaped up and began to retreat. "That damned meat jelly, why is it coming toward me?" He retreated, eyeing the meat jelly as it changed direction and shot toward him. Meng Hao couldn't believe it would pass him by. Having seen the destruction it left in its wake, he was certain it was coming directly toward him. Meng Hao's scalp went numb. He thought about the 2 nascent soul experts, the bizarre scripture sound, and the massive cage descending. His annoyance with the meat jelly intensified. But he was merely a Foundation establishment cultivator. No matter how fast he moved, he couldn't evade an item chased by 2 nascent souls and the entire Black Civ sect. The meat jelly was chained, but its speed was impossible to describe. One breath it was distant, the next it was directly in front of him. It slowly descended onto his head. Shock covered Meng Hao's face. He reached up, grabbed it, and threw it away. The instant it was thrown away, it hopped back, opened its mouth, and bit his arm. "If I can't escape," it wailed, "then neither can you, you immoral fellow." Patriarch Violet Civ and the woman approached in pursuit. When they saw what was happening, their eyes went wide with intense rage. "Doth thou dare?" raged the patriarch. His roar reached the heavens and the entire land quaked. His speed was incredible. Within moments he was in front of Meng Hao, rage on his face. His palm descended. Boom! A twinkling shield appeared around Meng Hao. It wasn't emitted by him, but by the meat jelly. Furthermore, as Meng Hao retreated, it wasn't under his own power, but because the meat jelly pulled him along by the arm. It had his arm firmly gripped in its mouth, blood seeping out. Its body trembled and was no longer translucent. It looked somewhat muddy. "So disgusting, so disgusting, so disgusting. Gross, gross, gross," it cried. The patriarch and the woman stood by, their expressions mixtures of rage and disbelief. "Bonding it's bonding a master." "I've bonded a master," cried the meat jelly, hopping onto Meng Hao's head and transforming into a hat. "I bond this guy as my master. It's useless to capture me now. I've already bonded a master. I have no flight and no shield. I'm crippled, going to die. You foolish ones, you're too evil. I. It suddenly turned to Meng Hao. "Hey, why haven't you teleported away yet?" Chapter 167. You know that's immoral. "Are you an idiot?" "Oh, I like idiots. Idiots are good. Idiots are great." E1. A quick word about E. This is a sound made in Chinese to express surprise or amazement. I hear it all the time, and it literally sounds like you are saying the letter E in a questioning tone. I could have translated it as O or Ah or something, but I think this transliteration more accurately captures the feeling of this uniquely Chinese sound. In Chinese, it's Chinese letter E. "How come you haven't teleported away yet? Wait, are you actually an idiot? Why did that bird pick an idiot?" the meat jelly chattered without stopping. Patriarch Violet Civ raised his head up to the sky and howled. He shot closer, lifting his hand. All the light seemed to grow dim, and ripples spread out everywhere before collapsing toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's face went pale. With a bitter smile, he looked at the glittering shield protecting him from Patriarch Violet Civ. It was rapidly collapsing. The faces within the black aura roared with rage. There was no time to think. He pinched the charm and a roar sounded. Pain filled his body. The moment before the shield broke, a black hole appeared next to him. It swallowed him up, along with the meat jelly. Meng Hao disappeared, along with the meat jelly's echoing voice. "Although it actually makes me like you more, are you really an idiot? No way, there's really no way. That bird is the root of all immorality, and yet the person he selected turns out to be an idiot. Idiot, idiot." The voice echoed into silence. Patriarch Violet Civ stood there, his face unsightly, rage surging from his eyes. The chain fell to the ground. The meat jelly had bonded Meng Hao and cast off the chain. "Bonded?" panted the patriarch. "It actually bonded a master. According to ancient records, it can't bond a master. It has never bonded a master." He lifted his head and roared. The beautiful woman took a deep breath. After a moment, her eyes glittered. The cage disintegrated and the chain broke into countless pieces, drifting away. The figures within the black aura began to fade and the aura dissipated. Patriarch Violet Civ's heart trembled. A good luck charm from the Milky Way luck sect. So that person was able to leave because of that object. I will find him. I will pay any cost necessary to find him. But his sect can't find out. Ultimate vexation has bonded a master. That's excellent. A new variable. Perhaps longevity chi cannot be produced, but longevity pills can. Meanwhile, in the southern domain, near the blood demon sect's sphere of influence was a lake. As smooth as a mirror, it emitted spiritual energy, causing mist to cover the area year-round. It had an otherworldly look. But that was only from a mortal's perspective. Although the spiritual energy was decent, it was far below that of the 5 great sects. Even some smaller sects had greater accumulations. Although within the blood demon sect's sphere of influence, it was on the edge, bordering solitary sword sect's territory. Occasionally cultivators from the blood demon sect flew by. It was relatively dangerous. That was because the blood demon sect and solitary sword sect had a blood feud, common knowledge among southern domain cultivators. Although no major conflicts had broken out, small fights occasionally occurred. Many areas surrounding the lake were actually battlefields for the solitary sword sect and the blood demon sect. Next to the lake was a mountain village inhabited by the Zio clan. The most powerful member was at mid-foundation establishment. 7 or 8 clan members were at chi condensation stage, and the rest had no latent talent. Years ago, the clan lord had been a blood demon sect disciple, but he was growing old, injured. His cultivation base could make no further progress, and his longevity was running out. In most cases, such disciples are asked to leave the sect and found clans in surrounding areas. Their heirs then have a chance to enter. Generally, even if solitary sword sect came into the region, they would ignore such people. As a result, the Xiao clan's territory had been relatively peaceful. But that peace was mostly because no large sect bullied them. Often there was friction with surrounding clans. This was especially true because of their position next to the Spirit Lake. Many surrounding clans coveted it, glaring like a tiger eyeing prey. Were it not for the Xiao clan lord's cultivation base, their clan would have been carved up. Unfortunately, Xiao clan lord Xiao Chang'an's too. Xiao Chang'an's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Zio Chang, and Xiao is a family name. Chang means long. En means favor or kindness. Longevity was reaching its end, his body deteriorating. A crisis was forming. Today, members of the Su clan arrived with ill intentions, strolling through the Xiao clan with cold smiles. "Fellow Taoist Chang'an," said Su clan lord Su Luodi III. Su Luodi's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Zhu Liu. Dai Su is a common family name. Luo has no particular meaning. Dai means dike or embankment, with a false smile and sinister voice. "Carefully consider my proposal. If we form a marriage alliance, we can share this lake. That will ensure the names of Su and Xia exist forever. Our clans will soon re-enter the blood demon sect." Behind him trailed 10 or more clan members at chi condensation stage. The most conspicuous was at 8th level. He was casting smiles toward a tall, slim young woman from the Xiao clan, who had a scowl on her face. She wore a long green robe. Wind from the lake lifted her silky hair. She had beautiful features and jade-like skin. Her intelligent eyes were like those of a red phoenix, tilted upward gently. She was truly a rare beauty. Xiao Chang'an stood next to her, looking sickly. His life force was growing dim. Behind him were 7 or 8 chi condensation clan members. He glanced at the Su clan, opened his mouth to speak, then trembled and coughed. The young woman reached out to support him, worry on her face. Xiao Chang'an took a deep breath and said, "Su Luodi, you can have the lake, but as for a marriage alliance, that's impossible." He patted the hand of the woman next to him, then glanced at the Su clan. He was clearly weak, but his look could chop nails and slice iron. "The Su clan wants this lake," said Su Luodi. "As for the Xiao clan's talisman expert girl, we want her too. If you agree, excellent, but if you disagree—" A smile covered his face, though his eyes glowed with killing intent. He took a step forward. As his foot descended, mid-foundation establishment pressure emanated out, filling the area. The Xiao clan cultivators' faces went pale with nervousness. Ripples spread across the lake. But at that exact moment, the sky above, filled with blazing sunlight, suddenly grew dark. It went back to normal in an instant. It happened so fast you might not notice if you blinked. But the faces of both clans flashed, and they all gasped. Disbelief appeared on Su Luodi's face. Xiao Chang'an's heart was filled with fury, yet all he could do was gape. All the clan members stared toward the lake. A gigantic black hole had appeared above the lake, sending the waters roiling. A person emerged from it, along with massive amounts of black aura. He coughed up blood. A noisy voice could be heard. "I'm not finished. Are you really an idiot, idiot, idiot?" Face pale, Meng Hao emerged and glanced around. His gaze landed on the cultivators from both clans. As the black hole disappeared, Xiao Chang'an stopped panting and collected himself. A strange light gleamed in his eye. The woman next to him was about to open her mouth, but he lightly covered it with his hand. He was the owner of the lake. Su Luodi wasn't the only one who had come recently with ill intentions. The current situation filled Xiao Chang'an's heart with anxiety. His eyes began to shine with a stern aura. A cold smile appeared. At first he was nervous, but after checking Meng Hao's cultivation base, he let out a light sigh. He was still a bit suspicious, though, considering the strange nature of his arrival. "Fellow Taoist, who are you, and why have you intruded upon this spirit lake?" These words were uttered not by Xiao Chang'an, but by Su Luodi. Meng Hao appeared at early foundation establishment. Considering the tenuous situation, he couldn't be certain this person wasn't assisting Xiao Chang'an. The 7 or 8 younger clan members started to get nervous and stare at Meng Hao. "Senior, some problems occurred with my teleportation and I inadvertently appeared here." Meng Hao's body flickered, and he landed on the shore. Xiao Chang'an pulled the woman back with him a few steps, away from Su Luodi. His fellow clansmen followed. He said nothing, but an enthusiastic look had suddenly appeared in his eyes. Su Luodi frowned when he saw this. As Meng Hao stepped onto the shore, Su Luodi suddenly strode forward, his mid-foundation establishment power flaring. A hypocritical smile filled his face as pressure radiated out. The hat on Meng Hao's head suddenly began speaking to him. You know that's wrong. That's very immoral. You shouldn't tell lies. You obviously came here because you were fleeing for your life. You did have a reason to come here. You came here on purpose. Meng Hao's face grew dark and Su Luodi stared in shock. Xiao Chang'an's eyes narrowed, though his expression went back to normal. The woman looked in wide-eyed astonishment at the hat on Meng Hao's head. Meng Hao frowned, then took the hat off his head, crumpled it into a ball and threw it away. Fellow Taoist, he said, ignoring it, where am I? What is the nearest sect? He glanced at Su Luodi's rippling cultivation base and vigilant expression, then looked at Xiao Chang'an. Fellow Taoist, there's no need to ask when you already know the answer. Why did you? Xiao Chang'an was starting to get a strange feeling. But before he could finish, he noticed that the hat which had just been crumpled and thrown away suddenly restored its shape and was back on Meng Hao's head. This chapter was sponsored by Eric Lane, Calvin Yee, Sergio, Max Baraniak and Twisted Shells. Chapter 168, The Xiao Clan Gifts the Lake. You know that's wrong, that's immoral. You can't just throw things onto the ground. What if you hit a little kid? That would be a sin. Even if you didn't hit a little kid, you might hit one of the fish in the lake or maybe some shrimp. That would also be wrong. Listen, you should carefully take me off. You should. The hat continued to talk nonstop with its preaching. Meng Hao frowned, and Su Luodi stared in amazement. His surrounding clansmen looked at the hat in disbelief. Su Luodi's face grew grim. He was getting the feeling that this early foundation establishment cultivator was doing this on purpose. Enough, said Su Luodi. This isn't a place where you can just come and go. If you won't tell the truth, I'll grab you and force it out. He couldn't figure out whether this guy was helping the Xiao clan, but Meng Hao was being annoying. More importantly, his cultivation base was only at early foundation establishment. He'd be able to determine his purpose after capturing him. Before finishing, Su Luodi walked forward. He lifted his right hand and a dark red glow appeared, coalescing into a red whip. It emitted cracking sounds as it screamed through the air. At the very end was a ferocious, fork-tongued snake head. It shot directly toward Meng Hao. As Su Luodi made his move, the Su clan behind him all looked incredibly excited. Whenever the clan lord attacked, he achieved victory. They couldn't wait to see him mop the floor with an early foundation establishment cultivator. Meng Hao gave Su Luodi a cool look. During his time protecting Su Qing in the Black Civ sect's blessed land, he had encountered many such cultivators. He lifted his hand, which held a dark reddish fruit. He threw it toward the ground. As soon as the fruit hit the ground, it burrowed down. The ground shook. As the dark red whip neared Meng Hao, a boom filled the air. Dark red vines shot out, rising a dozen or more meters high, emanating power matching mid-foundation establishment. The instant they appeared, they shot toward the whip. An explosion resonated out. The whip collapsed into pieces. The ferocious vines opened their mouths and shot toward Su Luodi. His face fell and the clan members looked on in disbelief. He cried out in alarm as the vines approached. His eyes narrowed and he pressed down on his stomach. He spat up blood, which transformed into a mist. The mist coalesced into a blood-colored head that slammed into the vines. An explosion echoed out, and the blood drained from Su Luodi's face. He staggered back into his pale-faced clansmen, who coughed up blood. A shaman cultivator, gasped Su Luodi, retreating. Xiao Chang'an's eyes went wide. The Xiao clan members' faces flickered. The young woman next to him began to breathe rapidly. Even if you're a shaman cultivator, your spirit minion is only at mid-foundation establishment. His eyes filled with killing intent. He knew that when dealing with shaman cultivators, their spirit minion was most important. Such cultivators had weak bodies and feared decapitation. However, before he could finish, he stopped speaking, as if something clamped down on his jaw. More earth showered up as another vine appeared. This one was violet-colored and twice as thick. The instant it appeared, it emanated power of the late foundation establishment stage. The vine wasn't originally like this, but Meng Hao had branded it with his blood, and it had mutated, the trunk now having the strength of late foundation establishment. "Screw off," said Meng Hao coolly. His expression didn't change and he wasn't worried. He had just escaped from nascent soul cultivators, so late foundation establishment cultivators were trivial to him. Xiao Chang'an's face flickered, and he felt anxiety, but seeing Meng Hao's smirk made him speechless. Su Luodi's expression flickered, and then he spun around. With the flick of a sleeve, he shot off with his clansmen. His eyes were filled with venomous hatred, not for Meng Hao, but for the Xiao clan. He was now convinced Meng Hao had been called to provide assistance. Meng Hao watched with the same expression as Su Luodi left. He didn't call back the vines. He looked at Xiao Chang'an with the same smirk. "Fellow Taoist," said Xiao Chang'an, "many thanks for your assistance. Xiao was also pushed into a corner. Please accept my apology for causing trouble." He clasped hands and bowed deeply to Meng Hao. Honest people don't need hidden words. Xiao Chang'an spoke very directly, causing a smile to break out on Meng Hao's face. Though he wasn't sure of all the details, he had picked up on clues, especially the excitement that had appeared on Xiao Chang'an's face. Meng Hao could see clearly that he had been used to pressure the Su clan. That was why he hadn't killed anyone but let Su Luodi escape. Su Luodi left in a rage, angry at the Xiao clan, not Meng Hao. Even though he was being used, he helped. He fixed the problem for now, but sooner or later the Su clan would return. If Meng Hao was gone, Xiao Chang'an would pay the price. That price wouldn't merely be a daughter and a lake. Xiao Chang'an laughed bitterly and bowed again. The young woman was silent, then seemed to come to a realization. She joined him in bowing toward Meng Hao. "Many thanks, benefactor," she said, her voice crisp and melodious. Everything was quiet except for the hat's voice. "And then you should lightly pick me up. You mustn't trample me underfoot." The voice had never stopped. Words poured out in a steady flow. Meng Hao frowned. "Fellow Taoist, please forgive me," said Xiao Chang'an. "I don't care if the Su clan covets my spirit lake or bullies me because of my declining longevity, but they want to swallow up my entire clan." A bitter look appeared. He began to cough violently. The young woman stepped forward, anxiety on her face. Meng Hao looked at Xiao Chang'an, seeing the thick death aura emanating from him. "What is this place?" he asked coolly. "Sir," said the young woman, "we are on the border between the Blood Demon sect and the Solitary Sword sect." Her voice was light, though nervousness filled her expression. Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding and retrieved a jade slip. He examined it, confirming his position with a frown. Xiao Chang'an watched him and the ferocious vines. He gritted his teeth. "Fellow Taoist," he said, "I would like to give you this spirit lake as a gift." All of the Xiao clan members, except for the young woman, stared in shock. Meng Hao lifted his head and looked at Xiao Chang'an. He didn't express any opinion whatsoever, nor did he speak. "I myself used to be a Blood Demon sect disciple," said Xiao Chang'an. "But I was injured, barely escaping with my life. My cultivation base can't advance, and my longevity can't increase. I only have a few years of life left. This spirit lake was passed down to me from the senior generation before he died. It's become the only way to grow the Xiao clan. However, more and more people have been casting eyes on it lately. I'm not sure how to keep it within the clan. The spiritual energy might not seem abundant, but it's very beneficial for spirit minions. Breathing exercises in this area are very good for them. Fellow Taoist, please accept the lake." His words were sincere. Although his heart was filled with bitterness, he couldn't think of any other option than this. His relationship with the Blood Demon sect had been severed, and he couldn't participate in any of the struggles and fighting that went on amongst the clans founded by former Blood Demon sect disciples. His only option was this early foundation establishment cultivator in front of him, who happened to have a spirit minion at the late foundation establishment stage. "Furthermore," continued Xiao Chang'an, "there's been friction lately between the Blood Demon sect and Solitary Sword sect. Occasionally great battles erupt, but this place isn't a battlefield, and no one pays much attention to it except for occasional disturbances from local clans." He chose his words carefully, trying to persuade Meng Hao to stay. Meng Hao smiled, and his eyes glittered. Although it wasn't what he had wanted, he ended up with the object the Black Civ sect had been seeking. He had no doubt aroused their ire, and though they wouldn't announce it publicly, they would search for him. "I wonder if elder sister Su will be implicated," he thought. "I don't think that's likely." Right now, his highest priority was to improve his cultivation base. He needed to form his fourth Tao pillar. That, coupled with his perfect foundation, would enable him to stand toe-to-toe with Tao children from the 5 sects and 3 clans. He would be above any chosen, and in the top 10 most powerful foundation establishment cultivators in the southern domain. After 6 Tao pillars, he was confident he could destroy any Tao child. Unfortunately, now that I have a perfect foundation, I have no way to absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth. Even if I could force the absorption, it would be too difficult. The only thing I can do is use medicinal pills, but that won't work for long. Meng Hao sighed inwardly. A perfect foundation was strong but had setbacks. That said, if he had to choose again, he would still choose it. What if I can reach late foundation establishment? He thought, his eyes shining. He looked at Xiao Chang'an for a long moment, then nodded. We can talk about the lake later, said Meng Hao coolly. I'll stay here for a few days in secluded meditation. Please don't disturb me. Furthermore, bring me all of the spirit stones you have in your clan. Xiao Chang'an's spirit seemed to lift at first, then a bitter smile covered his face. He gritted his teeth and nodded in agreement. Chapter 169. Heavens, you really don't know. Outside the Xiao clan mountain village, Su Luodi flew grim-faced, surrounded by his clansmen. He glanced back, his eyes filled with venomous anger. Xiao Chang'an, if you can recruit help, so can I, trifling shaman cultivator. Without his powerful spirit minion, I could slaughter him easily. With those cultivators, the only thing to worry about is their spirit minion. I'll behead him in an instant. He let out a cold snort and eyed his clansmen. You head back without me. This matter isn't finished. The Su clansmen dispersed. Su Luodi flicked his sleeve, transforming into a colorful beam that shot off. The only thing I can do is ask help from Mr. Sang Luo. He's at late foundation establishment stage with 7 Dao pillars. He can easily take care of the shaman cultivator. The only problem is he has an eccentric personality and might not agree. But considering the price paid years ago, he'll surely agree. It will all be worth it if I can get that spirit lake. His mind made up, Su Luodi sped up. He flew for about a day before arriving at a lonely mountain's foot. A few vultures circled overhead. Ahead was a pile of wood about 6 meters tall with a corpse on top. The corpse had clearly been rotting there for several months. A few vultures were perched on the wood pile, picking at it. They glanced at Su Luodi, their eyes shining mysteriously. They clearly weren't afraid. Su Luodi requests an audience with Mr. Sang Luo, he said, eyeing the corpse, his heart thumping. The corpse was clearly lifeless. However, he recognized the remains as belonging to a local clan lord at late foundation establishment stage. His words rang out into the lonely mountain. After some time, a raspy voice drifted out. This fellow looked down on me a few months ago, so I grabbed him and brought him here. I tied him up as punishment, but he was weak. He died after only 2 months. What matter brought you here? Su Luodi took a long breath and gave a deep bow toward the mountain. Senior, I've encountered some trouble. I would like to ask Mr. Sang Luo's assistance to kill someone. He spoke directly, knowing he didn't like long-winded explanations. Kill someone? Wahahaha, a peal of ear-piercing laughter rang out. Because of the friendship we developed, I can help you, but there are some requirements, a lot of requirements actually. I understand, said Su Luodi, lifting up a bag of holding. He tossed it out, and before it could hit the ground, it spun off into the distance, snatched up by some invisible force. Wait for me a few days, said the raspy voice. After I finish refining this guy's bones, then I'll go with you. Suddenly, the vultures picked up the corpse and flew off with it into the lonely mountain. Su Luodi took another deep breath, his eyes glowing brightly. Xiao Chang'an, let's see how you fight back this time. His eyes filled with killing intent, Su Luodi sat cross-legged to meditate. Back in the Xiao clan mountain village, Meng Hao also sat cross-legged in a small room near the lake. A soft glow surrounded him that allowed him to see out but prevented anyone outside from seeing inside. The glow was cast by 9 paper talismans. The young Xiao clan woman had painted them and personally delivered them. After setting up the talismans, she had departed with a respectful bow. After she left, Meng Hao spat out the lightning mist, spreading it to cover the area. Finally, he could open his bag without anxiety. He pulled out the Civ Earth pill he'd acquired and examined it closely. As he examined the pill, the meat jelly hat began to talk. Hey, where did I leave off just now? Right, let's continue the matter from yesterday. You can't do that, it's immoral. You can't just throw me down onto the ground. That's too excessive. Meng Hao didn't respond. The meat jelly hadn't stopped talking. It seemed it could speak on a single subject for an entire day, repeating itself endlessly, never getting bored. What would happen if you hit a little kid? It's also bad for the grass and plants. The little fish and other creatures are all innocent. It buzzed in Meng Hao's ears. He tried to ignore it, but the voice seemed to grow louder. Eventually, it was shouting, its voice drifting past the lightning mist shield outside. When they heard it, The Xiao clan members all exchanged glances. "Shut up," grinding his teeth, Meng Hao grabbed the hat and threw it down. I wasn't finished. Where did I leave off? Oh well, let me change topics. You can't do that. It's immoral. Meng Hao lifted his head toward the sky, his expression increasingly unsightly. After a moment he stood up and began to trample on the hat. The old man's face suddenly appeared. Even though Meng Hao trampled it fiercely, it didn't let out miserable cries. Instead, it seemed to speak more earnestly. "You can't do that, it's too cruel, it's too immoral." "What do you want?" said Meng Hao, taking a few steps back and clenching his jaw. "You escaped, why are you following me? Go away." "I've bonded you as my master. Bonding a master means bonding for life. I would never be so immoral as to leave. I would never do something so lacking in principle, so lacking in—" Meng Hao slowly lifted his head and stared blankly into the air. After enough time for 2 incense sticks to burn, he finally looked back. "So lacking in character. I just told you 745 things I lack. Do you see how civilized I am? How sincere? In a word, I would never leave you." Meng Hao didn't say anything. He suddenly lifted his hand and summoned a flame dragon which slammed into the hat. This time, a miserable cry rang out, quickly replaced by endless chatter. The hat was undamaged. As Meng Hao stared at it, veins popped out on his forehead. He had always thought of himself as good-tempered, but now his temper was exploding. He jumped up and down on the hat, trampling it. But a few moments later he stopped. Continuing to gush words, the hat returned to his head. This time, however, it changed colors. Now it was green, and its appearance was a bit more exaggerated one. If you're unfamiliar with what green hats mean in Chinese culture, check out this article. Meng Hao's face turned dark. "Look, child, don't struggle. I'm a good person. I'm trying to help you. You're on the path of wickedness, but I'm willing to use my own power to help you. Child, perhaps you are unaware of how many young people take a wrong step and regret it for an eternity. I'll help you cast off the bitterness. I'll help you free yourself from that damned bird. I failed in my last life, and the life before that, and the life before that too. That damned, despicable bird is the only bird I've never converted." The hat seemed to be grinding its teeth. "In this life, I will convert it." "Who is this bird you keep talking about?" said Meng Hao, his face grim. A strange feeling had risen inside him. This hat couldn't be killed and couldn't be thrown away. It really was extremely annoying. "You don't know?" asked the hat, suddenly flying off his head. Its shape rippled back into the meat jelly. The archaic face appeared, looking disbelieving as it gazed at Meng Hao. "Heavens, you really don't know who that damned, mass-murdering shameless—" The meat jelly began to quiver as it let off curses. Meng Hao let out a long sigh and looked up into the air. After enough time for an incense stick to burn, he finally looked back. The meat jelly was finally concluding. "Should be thrown into a cesspool, damned bird. You really don't know who it is." Meng Hao glared at it for a long moment before slowly saying, "I don't know." "You really don't know?" asked the meat jelly, shocked. "You really, really don't know? Impossible. You really, really, really don't know." "I don't know." Meng Hao clenched his teeth. It was frustrating trying to communicate with this meat jelly. "Heavens, you have its aura on your body, but you don't know. How is this possible? Heavens, heavens. You really, really, really don't know." Its eyes widened with complete disbelief. Meng Hao didn't know what to say. He closed his eyes and sat down to meditate. With a bang, the meat jelly transformed back into a bright green hat and flew onto his head. Considering his scholar's robes, the hat was extremely conspicuous. Anyone who caught sight of it would surely do a double take. Enough time passed for an incense stick to burn. "But how can you not know?" "2 incense sticks. Inconceivable, you actually don't know." 2 hours. Why aren't you saying anything? Oh, I understand, you're ashamed. Look, it's okay, I'm a good person. I will do everything I can to bring you back from the path of wickedness. Meng Hao's face grew increasingly unsightly. He really had reached his breaking point. His temper exploded. He roared, grabbing the hat and throwing it outside. He slapped his bag of holding, and nearly 100 flying swords appeared and shot toward it. His hand flickered with incantations, and the flame dragon and wind blade appeared. A boom rattled out in all directions, striking fear into the Xiao clan members. Xiao Chang'an's eyes went wide. Even though he couldn't see what was happening, the explosion itself was astonishing. The young woman looked dazed, then a strange expression appeared. Meng Hao ground his teeth, stalking forward, slashing his finger and covering it with blood. The blood finger appeared. His other hand flashed with the 8th demon sealing hex. Massive explosions filled heaven and earth. A moment later, the ripples died down. Meng Hao's entire body exuded bitterness as he stared at the meat jelly, which skipped and hopped about energetically. It's so strange. You really don't know. How is it possible? You really don't know. Chapter 170, Lonely Sang Luo. Meng Hao was filled with regret. He should never have asked that question. He had no clue the meat jelly would talk on and on. He took a deep breath, but before he could speak, the meat jelly's expression brightened. Oh, I know. You haven't reached core formation, so it can't come out. Ha ha ha, it can't come out. Meng Hao lowered his head, filled with helplessness. He looked at the meat jelly with a bitter smile. He ground his teeth for a long moment before saying, "If you don't shut up, I'm going to take you back to the Black Civ sect." He just wanted to voice the frustration from the constant droning. That's okay. In any case, I've bonded a master, so it would be useless. Refining me would require refining you. A dumbfounded look filled the meat jelly's face. It thought for a moment. That's a good idea. I wonder what it would feel like if we got refined together. Let me think. Anticipation covered its face, causing Meng Hao to seem even more hopeless. How exactly can I get you to leave? He said with a bitter laugh, his voice softer. Hearing this, the meat jelly instantly looked much more serious. Its voice solemn, it began to speak. Meng Hao ignored it, looking into the air for an incense stick's worth of time. In short, I will definitely never leave you. I need to convert that bird. Until I convert it, I'll never leave. Meng Hao had always thought of himself as very focused. Once he set his mind to something, he couldn't be distracted. But now he realized that was before he had met the meat jelly. Be it himself or any other consummate expert, anyone who met this garrulous, long-winded thing would surely be driven crazy. Meng Hao took a deep breath. He now had a much better understanding of the thing's personality. It must not be given a conversation topic. After about an hour, he had reached a state in which he could somewhat ignore the chattering. Despite the meat jelly's constant talking, Meng Hao took out the Civ Earth pill and began to examine it. An earnest expression filled his face, but it was very hard to ignore the endless rambling, especially when the meat jelly flew off his head and landed in front of him, seeming humiliated to be ignored. "You can't do that, it's immoral," it cried, launching into another tirade. Soon, night approached, and Meng Hao's face was covered with exhaustion. Buzzing filled his ears, and his eyes were bloodshot as he completely ignored the meat jelly. He discovered with despair that even if it wasn't given a conversation topic, the meat jelly would still continue to talk. Until dawn, until the next night, the moon hung brightly. And then, finally, it seemed the meat jelly had run out of things to talk about. Meng Hao let out a sigh, and the meat jelly flew out to the lake shore and began to talk to the fish. Meng Hao let out another sigh of relief. He pulled out the copper mirror and the spirit stones given by the Xiao clan. He placed the Civ Earth pill onto the mirror and duplicated a single one. He produced a jade slip, branded it with spiritual sense, then flicked it out the window. Moments later, the young Xiao clan woman approached nervously, leading a spirit monkey. The monkey screeched as it approached. The young woman looked off toward the lake shore for a moment at the meat jelly hat, which was currently shouting toward the lake. Xiao Keifeng 1. Xiao Keifeng's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Zio Kaifeng. Xiao is a family name. Kai means colorful. Feng means phoenix. Greets the elder generation, she said, pulling her gaze from the meat jelly back to Meng Hao and the lightning mist. She bowed in greeting, then proffered the leash bound to the spirit monkey. Meng Hao's eyes opened. Without a word, he sent an earth sieve pill flying toward the monkey. The monkey consumed it instantly. It let out a few screeches, and its eyes rolled about. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he observed, probing the monkey with his spiritual sense. Suddenly, moonlight seemed to form threads which the monkey began to absorb. Contentment slowly filled the monkey's eyes. About 4 hours passed in which Meng Hao observed the monkey, and Xiao Keifeng stood patiently off to the side. Finally, Meng Hao nodded. "Very good," he said coolly. Xiao Keifeng let out a sigh of relief. Clasping hands and bowing, she led the monkey away. It was obviously much more powerful than before. Meng Hao lowered his head thoughtfully. Using the spirit stones provided, he began to duplicate the pill. The full name was Moon Civ Mother Earth Pill, consumed only at night. It used moonlight as nourishment and provided excellent results. The duplication cost was considerable, and the Xiao clan wasn't great. They hadn't provided many spirit stones, and soon, Meng Hao had used half of them. The result was 6 duplicated pills. I wasted 1 pill, but caution required it. Dawn broke, and Meng Hao looked down at the 6 pills. He closed his eyes in thought, wondering how many it would take to develop his 4th Dao pillar. Now that he had completed the circle of 3 Dao pillars, his 4th perfect Dao pillar shouldn't be far from becoming visible. Time passed slowly, and soon it was afternoon. The meat jelly was still at the lake shore, chatting with the lake waters. With his spiritual sense, Meng Hao could determine that all the fish had retreated to the bottom to hide. There was only one left, slamming its head against the shore, seemingly unable to take any more torment. Fear lingering in his heart, Meng Hao collected the remaining spirit stones. He was very afraid of attracting the meat jelly's attention and its excited ramblings. The last thing he needed was for it to come up with a new topic. He retracted his spiritual sense, and then suddenly his expression flickered. He looked past the lightning mist at the world outside. At that moment, two colorful beams appeared in the sky above the Xiao clan mountain village, then shot down toward it. In the lead was a cultivator wearing a black robe. He was very short, a midget in fact. His long robe covered his face and trailed behind through the air. At first glance, you wouldn't notice the midget inside. You would only see a black robe flying. Behind him was grim-faced Su Luodi, whose eyes radiated killing intent. Of course, the short cultivator was none other than Mr. Sang Luo, from whom Su Luodi had requested help. The two moved incredibly fast, and within moments had landed in the Xiao clan mountain village. The midget spoke with a cruel, piercing voice that rolled out like thunder, covering the clan. Xiao Keifeng's face went pale, and Xiao Chang'an's pupils constricted, fear filling his eyes. A roaring boom filled the air before anyone could emerge, and the clan shook as its protective shield was smashed to pieces. The main gate, just outside the lake, crumbled into dust. A gale-force wind swept across. The clan's manor houses shook and some collapsed. The clan members who couldn't cultivate trembled. Pale-faced, Xiao Chang'an quickly led a group out. His face filled with astonishment when he saw the collapsed gate and the midget striding forward, his black robe trailing behind. He staggered backward. So it's this savage. Could doomsday have arrived for the Xiao clan? Because of the midget's presence, he wasn't able to summon even the least bit of fighting spirit. Mr. Sang Luo too. Sang Luo's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Sang Luo. This is not a realistic name. Sang means funeral or mourning. Luo means catch or net, was quite famous in the region. Although he didn't dare to rile the blood demon sect, no one among the surrounding cultivator clans dared to provoke him. His cultivation base was extremely high at late foundation establishment stage. It wouldn't be long before he could step into nascent core stage. He was savage and cruel, and if even one word was spoken wrongly, he would attack with vicious cruelty. He really had earned a fearful reputation. Based on that alone, he might not necessarily be in such a good position. After all, the cultivator clans in this area were all filled with people connected to the blood demon sect. However, this Sang Luo had once been a disciple of the blood demon sect, but he had broken some sect rules and was expelled. His cultivation base had been left intact, and he hadn't been prevented from causing trouble. Xiao Chang'an had even heard that he had an older brother who wasn't a midget and had extraordinary latent talent. Apparently, he was a chosen of the blood demon sect. "I, Xiao Chang'an, extend greetings to Mr. Sang Luo," said Xiao Chang'an, his face pale as he watched him approach, Su Luodi at his side radiating murder. Su Luodi had a pleased expression, causing Xiao Chang'an to sigh inwardly. He didn't place much hope in Meng Hao now. His spirit minion was powerful, but his cultivation base was simply too weak. Sang Luo let out a piercing snort as he approached with Su Luodi. His eyes gazed about from within the robe. "Xiao Chang'an," said Su Luodi, "call out that shaman cultivator you invited." He laughed coldly. "Are you scared to show your face, shaman boy? Get the hell out here." His voice thundered out, causing Xiao Chang'an to stand there bitterly, not daring to say a word. Behind him, his clansmen trembled. Only Xiao Keifeng stood there motionless, face pale but eyes filled with fury. Sang Luo stood there, enjoying the fear in the Xiao clan members' eyes. He also reveled in Su Luodi's words. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. To him, life was as desolate as snow. It was lonely at the top, and in his heart was the desire to find someone who could defeat him. As soon as Su Luodi's voice passed through the lightning mist, Meng Hao stood up. Meng Hao also heard the meat jelly, and it seemed as if it was preparing to conclude its speech. It wouldn't be long before it returned to pester him. "I really need to find someone to help free me from this torment," he thought. "I'm really in agony." Gritting his teeth, he strode out. The air around the lake rippled as thunder mist rolled out. Meng Hao looked somewhat bitter as he walked forward. Beneath him, the ground heaved as the vines shot up to sway and emit piercing shrieks. Meng Hao's eyes were bloodshot from the meat jelly's torment. He looked at Su Luodi, then the midget. He decided to target late foundation establishment stage, hoping the battle might last longer. Trifling early foundation establishment stage, said Sang Luo coolly as he eyed Meng Hao approaching. Su Luodi, you're equally hopeless. His eyes peered out of his robe, filled with pride and aloofness. Again, his heart filled with the powerful loneliness of snow. Mr. Sang Luo, Sr., you really can't blame me, said Su Luodi hurriedly. Just help me get rid of the spirit minion. With that out of the way, I can easily smash this guy to pieces. He glared ruthlessly at Meng Hao. What Su Luodi didn't know was that true cruelty would not come to bear upon Meng Hao, but rather Sang Luo, lonely as snow. Something would happen that Sang Luo would never forget for the rest of his life. It would give him nightmares for his days and leave a shadow on his soul. And it would happen shortly. Perhaps afterwards, he would no longer feel as lonely as snow. This chapter was sponsored by De Hua, David White, Jose Lubers, L.N. Lurker, Randall Bezant, Yuqiang HSU, Maggie Lee and David Fan. Chapter 171, Blood Demon Dao Child. Sang Luo snorted arrogantly at Su Luodi. Su Luodi glowed with vitality as he gazed at Meng Hao approaching. His eyes were thick with cruelty. Today, Su Luodi will help you to understand that when you help someone you shouldn't, you will incur my wrath, he said, his voice filled with crazed fervor. And I will also help you to understand what shaman cultivators fear the most. The various Xiao clan members were all pale-faced. Xiao Changjin laughed a bitter laugh, well aware that he had no way to undo what had already been done. He took a deep breath and strode forward, power from his cultivation base suddenly exploding out. It was the power of the mid-foundation establishment stage, but it seemed somewhat weak. He was reaching the end of his longevity, so his chi passageways had long since begun to wither. With effort, he could display the power of the mid-foundation establishment stage, but in doing so, would actually harm his life force. The matter today has to do with the Xiao clan, not any outsider, he said, his entire body seeming to grow taller. This person wasn't invited here by the Xiao clan, he's only passing through. If the disappearance of the Xiao clan is the will of the heavens, then take this spirit lake. But if you intend to take any of my clan members, then you must treat them well. Otherwise, I'll make you pay, even if I have to die in the process. His words echoed out with great power, causing Su Luodi's brow to furrow. Sang Luo, the midget, emitted a shrieking laugh. Meng Hao looked over at Xiao Changjin, and suddenly his feelings toward the man changed. He nodded and then coolly said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, didn't you give this lake to me as a gift? In that case, it belongs to me. Does anyone here dare to attempt to take it away?" The vines in front of him shot towards Sang Luo and Su Luodi. Sang Luo let out an ear-piercing laugh filled with contempt and disdain. He flipped his sleeve grandly, and from within a black sealing stone flew out. It expanded as it shot forward, emitting a strong pressure that caused all of the vines to stop in their tracks. Only the main trunk vine continued onward, howling. Sang Luo's piercing laughter accompanied him as he took a step forward. He lifted his right arm to reveal a hand much smaller than an average person's. He waved it toward the approaching main trunk vine. A black wind sprang up and whistled toward the vine. At the same time, Su Luodi's laughter filled the air. His body flashed as he made a beeline toward Meng Hao, his eyes shining with fierce killing intent. The instant he took to motion, however, Xiao Changjin suddenly leaped to obstruct his path. A look of disdain covering his face, Su Luodi flicked his wide sleeve. A roaring sound filled the air, and Xiao Changjin was pushed back. "I'm not going to kill you for now," he laughed. "We'll be relatives by marriage soon and still have wedding wine to drink." He shot toward Meng Hao. "And now I'll help you to understand that what shaman cultivators fear most is being beheaded," he laughed arrogantly. Meng Hao's face remained unchanged as he allowed Su Luodi to approach. When Su Luodi was about 9 meters away, Meng Hao's eyes shone with cold light. He didn't retreat, but instead flickered, and suddenly appeared directly in the path of Su Luodi. He lifted his hand, and a billowing flame sea appeared along with a roaring, 300-meter-long flame dragon. Su Luodi's expression changed to complete disbelief. It was almost as if he didn't dare to believe what he was seeing. But he felt the intense pressure exuded by the flame dragon, which far exceeded that of the late foundation establishment stage. A sense of life-or-death danger filled his entire body, inundating his head with a booming drone. It was as if his body had been struck with countless lightning bolts. His face continued to be filled with disbelief. Late foundation establishment. His body began to tremble, and intense dread shone from his eyes. How could he ever have imagined that the young man of the early Foundation establishment stage could possibly erupt with the power of late Foundation establishment? As for his so-called beheading, the person he thought he could so easily defeat had suddenly transformed into a violent beast who could slaughter him hundreds of thousands of times over. Xiao Chang'an gasped and stared dumbstruck, his mind filled with buzzing, and then his eyes filled with wild joy. When the flame dragon appeared, the suppressed vines shook and lifted up. Within the black robe, two eyes emanated shock. All of this takes some time to describe, but actually happened in an instant. Even as Su Luodi's voice could be heard, it was replaced by a blood-curdling scream which sounded out throughout the whole area. The 300-meter-long flame dragon slammed into him, instantly transforming his body into bits of ash which floated in the air. Only his scream remained behind, echoing through the air. His bag of holding flew into Meng Hao's hand. As the scene played out in front of everyone, Xiao Chang'an's expression grew excited. Next to him, Xiao Keifeng gazed at Meng Hao, her eyes filled with a strange glow. The rest of the Xiao clansmen stared at Meng Hao with excitement. Sang Luo's expression darkened. His heart raced after witnessing Su Luodi's death. He was a cautious person by nature, so he immediately retreated. He was of the late Foundation establishment stage, but he wasn't the type to risk himself. His body flashed as he attempted to flee. In his mind, his opponent would most likely have some apprehensions and wouldn't pursue. If his opponent didn't pursue, he viewed himself as inferior. In that case, Sang Luo could make a sudden reverse attack to kill him. This was a tactic that he had frequently employed and had practiced until the proverbial furnace flames burned blue. However, as soon as he began to fly off, Meng Hao gave off a cold harumph and then leaped into the air, transforming into a prismatic beam that shot after Sang Luo. Seeing this, Sang Luo's face immediately fell. The fact that he's chasing me proves that he thinks he can kill me. This can't be right. His heart trembled as he raced forward. He waved his right hand, causing the black sealing stone to emit a buzzing sound as it shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao could fight with late Foundation establishment cultivators who had 9 Dao pillars, although he couldn't do so lightly. Sang Luo, however, only had a mere 7 Dao pillars. Meng Hao had the luxury of being able to look down on him. His right hand flickered with an incantation gesture, and the 2 wooden swords appeared. One shot toward the black seal, the other became a colorful beam that shot in pursuit of Sang Luo. A boom filled the air as the black sealing stone was shattered into pieces. Sang Luo let out an angry howl. He eyed the approaching wooden sword, and his body trembled. He quickly snapped a jade slip between his fingers, and then made an incantation gesture with both hands, after which he waved the index of his right finger in the air in front of him. As he did, everything around him seemed to grow dark, as if his finger were sucking in some strange power from around him. His body began to emanate an annoying, prickly aura that caused Meng Hao to frown. He had first sensed an aura like this in the Black Civ Sect 1. If you want to review the part where he sensed the aura in the Black Civ Sect, check out Chapter 143, Ghost in the Night. This aura, however, was much weaker, like a firefly compared to a full moon. Actually, now that he thought about it, he had experienced a similar reaction when he was in the cave in the mountain valley. A booming sound once again filled the air as the wooden sword came screeching to a stop in midair. A rushing wind blew back the midget's robes, revealing an ugly, scarred face and 2 strange eyes filled with fear. Beads of sweat dripped down his face. "Fellow Taoist, let's talk things through," said Sang Luo nervously. He could tell that whereas he was using all the power he could muster, his opponent was acting casually. The differences between masters are usually instantly obvious. Meng Hao took a moment to sense the aura emanating off of the midget. His heart thumped. He had his speculations regarding this aura, and now that he had seen it once again, he lifted his hand and extended a finger. Demon Sealing 8th Hex. As his finger descended, everything grew dark. Sang Luo suddenly began to tremble, and his eyes shone with astonishment. He immediately sensed the chi of heaven and earth changing. Suddenly, his cultivation base was suppressed. A whizzing sound could be heard as the wooden sword in front of him shot forward. In the blink of an eye, it would plunge into his neck. His eyes filled with despair. However, at this exact moment, Meng Hao flicked his sleeve. The wooden sword, instead of ripping his head off, spun down and then carried Sang Luo with it back toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao reached out and grabbed Sang Luo by the neck. At this moment, Sang Luo's cultivation base was restored, and he could move his body again. His face was pale, though, his eyes filled with terror. He didn't dare to move even an inch. The hand which clamped down on his neck emanated a feeling of death that caused his heart to tremble. In fact, Being this close to Meng Hao caused his entire person to shake. Meng Hao's aura made his heart seize with terror. His face was pale as he stammered, "You're." Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, there was a mountain range that was covered in black clouds year-round. Within a valley in this mountain range were two young people. They sat upright, gazing at the go board which lay between them, seemingly lost in thought. One of the young people wore white clothing along with an indifferent expression. This youth's features were beautiful to the extreme, almost otherworldly. The fan in his hand slowly waved back and forth. The other person wore a blue garment. He looked to be about 30 years of age. He held a gold piece in his hands as he stared down thoughtfully at the board. Hanging from his face was a jade pendant. Suddenly, a popping sound could be heard, and a crack appeared on its surface. When the crack appeared, the blue-robed young man frowned. He looked at the jade piece and then back at the go board. "Is something wrong?" asked the white-robed youth in a light, tender voice. "Nothing," replied the blue-robed young man respectfully. "It's just my good-for-nothing brother. He must have offended someone who he's not a match for. He wants me to save him." "That would be saying Luo correct," the white-robed youth smiled. "Go ahead and check out the situation. I don't have anything else to do, I'll tag along." The blue-robed youth immediately stood up. "Your Highness, your status as a Dao child is so lofty, I don't dare." "There's no harm." This white-robed youth was none other than a Dao child of the Blood Demon sect. Chapter 172, Charging into Mid-Foundation Establishment. Within the Xiao clan, Xiao Chang'an gazed at Meng Hao with enthusiasm. His clansmen stared with similar fervor. Meng Hao nodded toward them but said nothing. He entered his shielded room by the lake, holding Sang Luo by the neck as the lightning mist appeared. He sat down cross-legged and loosened his grip on Sang Luo. He stood pale-faced before Meng Hao, respect in his eyes, though he nervously awaited his older brother's arrival. His tiny eyes darted around, eventually falling upon the hat, which still stood next to the lake. He heard the hat's garrulous voice, but didn't dare to stare. He felt this place was even more bizarre than his own remote mountain. Meng Hao looked at Sang Luo for a moment, trying to decide what to do with him. Finally, he lifted his hand into the air and made a grasping motion. The aura emanating from Sang Luo's body condensed into Meng Hao's palm. It seemed invisible, but to Meng Hao, it was very prickly and irritating in nature. He frowned, looking closer at the aura. His eyes flickered. "Could this be demonic qi?" he murmured. He let the aura disperse and examined Sang Luo closely. Sang Luo felt goosebumps under Meng Hao's gaze. "Fellow Taoist," he said, but was interrupted by Meng Hao. "There's an evil-doing cultivator here who needs converting," he said with a slight cough. Hearing this, Sang Luo gaped in astonishment. Suddenly, the meat jelly, which had been talking to the fish in the lake just now, leaped up and seemed to stare fixedly at Sang Luo. Who is it?" said the meat jelly excitedly, rushing over. "You, my poor evildoer, you can't do that. It's immoral. In the name of justice, allow me to convert you." Before Sang Luo could react, Meng Hao flicked his sleeve, pushing him backward and snatching his bag. At the same time, the black net shot out and wrapped up Sang Luo tightly. Meng Hao shot backward, creating space between himself and the stupefied Sang Luo. At that instant, the meat jelly hat landed onto Sang Luo's head. It sighed, "Child, there's no need to fear. Allow the mighty embodiment of justice to lead you from wickedness." It seemed to be fairly leaping with excitement. "What a well-behaved little child. There's no need to resist, no need fight back, no need to feel perplexed. I will help you. Listen, the first thing you need to do is..." As the meat jelly prattled on, Sang Luo's body began to tremble. However, he didn't dare to fight back. Meng Hao pitied Sang Luo slightly. He erased the branding within Sang Luo's bag of holding. When he opened it, his eyes shined brightly. There was quite an accumulation of spirit stones inside, many times more than that which had been given to him by the Xiao clan. "This should be just about the amount I need for duplication purposes. Plus, I have a handful of bags of holding that I acquired in the Black Civ sect's blessed land. There are a few Civ Earth pills in those. Not many, but a few." He waved his hand, causing the lightning mist to condense so that no one in the area could see inside. Then he pulled out the copper mirror and began to duplicate. Time passed, and soon dusk fell. From outside the lightning mist, enraged shouting could be heard coming out of Sang Luo's mouth. It seemed to be filled with an indescribable torment and misery. "Be quiet, let me go. Ah, you damned hats, shut up." "AI, don't be like that, child, you know. You interrupted me. I forgot where I left off. Oh well, I'll just start over. Listen well, okay? The path of evil is filled with thistles and thorns. But don't worry, child, I'm here. I definitely will not allow the thistles and thorns to stab into your tender buttocks. Meng Hao glanced outside, feeling a bit sympathetic for Sang Luo. Then he looked down at the several dozen or so sieve earth pills in front of him. He took a deep breath and then picked one up and placed it into his mouth. It dissolved, turning into spiritual power Meng Hao hadn't felt in a long time. His body was like a parched desert flooded with nourishing water. His face lit up as he closed his eyes to breathe. Slowly he filtered out the sounds of the outside world and sank into cultivation. 1 pill, 2 pills, 3 pills. As he swallowed the pills, beams of moonlight in the night sky began to twist and turn. They descended down toward the earth and onto Meng Hao. From a distance, it looked like massive silk descending on the Xiao clan. The Civ Earth pill really did deserve to be called a divine pill of the Black Civ sect, and one of the 5 most effective pills in the southern domain for the Foundation establishment stage. It was powerfully effective, much more so than Meng Hao had imagined. When he put the 17th pill into his mouth, his body instantly began to shake. The indistinct image of a rapidly congealing 4th Dao pillar was suddenly visible inside him. When it was complete, Meng Hao's cultivation base would have broken through to the mid-foundation establishment stage. He took a deep breath, frowning as he looked up at the shining waterfall of moonlight above him in the sky. It's really a bit too conspicuous. This is an amazing pill, but it's definitely going to attract a lot of attention. There was nothing to do about it, however. The only thing he could do was try to break through as quickly as possible, form the 4th Dao pillar and reach mid-foundation establishment. He took a deep breath and picked up the 18th Civ Earth pill. When he placed it into his mouth, his 3 perfect Dao pillars trembled, sucking in boundless spiritual power. The 4th Dao pillar was rapidly becoming solid. Outside, in the darkness of the night, the sheets of moonlight had indeed attracted attention within the Xiao clan. Xiao Chang'an might be nearing the end of his longevity, but his eyesight was sharp. His eyes narrowed, and he immediately moved over to the shielded area within which Meng Hao was practicing cultivation. He sat down cross-legged to keep guard. Meng Hao had showed great kindness to the Xiao clan. Xiao Chang'an knew that after his own death, the only chance for his clan to survive had to do with Meng Hao. Therefore, he had resolved that no matter what, he would not allow Meng Hao's cultivation to be disturbed. The moonlight caused quite a stir in the surrounding cultivation clans. More than a few people flew up into the air to investigate the area where the moonlight was cascading onto. This was especially true of Sang Luo's older brother, the blue-robed young man. He flew along together with the white-robed youth. They flew through the air unhurriedly. It seemed as if they weren't going very fast, but in fact, they shot forward several hundred meters with each burst of flight. When they saw the falling sheets of moonlight, the white-robed youth's eyes narrowed. The blue-robed young man frowned. That appears to be the same place where Sang Luo is. Interesting. Someone in Blood Demon Sect territory is consuming a Civ Earth pill from the Black Civ Sect, and from the look of it, more than 1 pill. At this exact moment, deep in a forested region some distance from the Xiao clan, was an enormous tree. Within the tree was a group of 10 cultivators sitting closed-eyed in meditation. Each member of this group had a sword strapped to his back, and they all wore identical clothing. It was very quiet, not a crow or sparrow could be heard. But when the sheets of moonlight appeared, the 10 people opened their eyes to look at it. Chen Fan was among the group. He looked off into the distance, frowning. Hushed discussion immediately broke out among these cultivators, all of whom were all disciples of the Solitary Sword sect. That area is near the border of the Blood Demon sect. What is that phenomenon? That's the sign of someone consuming a Civ Earth pill from the Black Civ sect. It can't be covered up. Someone in that area must be consuming medicinal pills. Just how many pills did that person consume? That amount of moonlight is shocking. Within the Xiao clan manor, clan members all began to grow nervous, as if they were about to face up against a powerful foe. The past days had been a mixture of both pleasant surprises and horrifying dread. Once and again, they had faced extermination as a clan, and repeatedly had been saved. As of this moment, their hearts pounded. This was especially true when they saw the conspicuous cascading moonlight. It only served to cause them more anxiety and nervousness. Xiao Keifeng was pale-faced. She had a talent for talismans, but was hindered by her cultivation base and couldn't fully employ their power. She could only stand off to the side, silently watching Xiao Chang'an sitting cross-legged as he guarded over Meng Hao. Not much time passed before beams of multicolored light filled the night sky, screaming toward the Xiao clan from all directions. From the look of it, there were at least 10 figures. They floated there in the sky, eyes glittering as their gazes fell onto the Xiao clan, and Meng Hao's secluded meditation area, upon which poured sheets of moonlight. An old man of the early Foundation establishment stage approached, laughing loudly. Interesting. I think I'll just have to see who exactly is in secluded meditation, causing such a scene. From his expression, it was clear he did not have good intentions. Greed flickered in his eyes. Obviously, he intended to disturb the meditation and snatch away the luck of whoever sat within. It seemed everyone in the area had similar plans. The Zio clan was by no means weak. However, the Su clan was not the only one in the area who had coveted the lake. Many of the surrounding clans had eyed it like a tiger eyeing its prey. The newly arrived cultivators watched the old man as Zio Chang'an looked up at him. The power of Zio Chang'an's cultivation base suddenly exploded out. He took a deep breath and shot up into the sky. A boom rang out, and the old man spun backward out of control, coughing up some blood along the way. Zio Chang'an's face looked deathly pale as he hovered in the air, glaring around. "I, Zio Chang'an, already have one foot in the coffin," he said coolly. "Life and death mean little to me. Anyone who wishes to tread the path of death with me, please, step forward." His cultivation base was not incredibly high, but his words contained a powerful threat. Underneath the shield, the growth of Meng Hao's cultivation base had reached a critical juncture. As he continued to consume the Civ Earth pills, his fourth Dao pillar was more than half solidified. It wouldn't be long before it was complete. When that happened, Meng Hao would not be infinitely more powerful than before, but he would be able to sweep effortlessly across the Foundation establishment stage. That was the power of a perfect foundation. Chapter 173, Rejected by the Heavens, Plunder. Meng Hao was focused on breaking through to form his fourth Dao pillar. However, regarding what was happening on the outside, it was no surprise to him. He had anticipated that such circumstances would come about. The cascading moonlight had focused attention on his increase in level. Although it hadn't attracted universal attention, it had certainly caused quite a disturbance. Meng Hao was well aware that as more time passed, the situation would grow more volatile. The best method to bring matters to conclusion was to finish breaking through as quickly as possible. However, a perfect foundation could not absorb spiritual energy from heaven and earth. He was only able to rely on the Civ Earth pills, and despite their extraordinariness, the process was becoming more difficult. He could clearly sense that they were losing their efficacy. Based on his momentum, they wouldn't suffice to complete the fourth Dao pillar. As Meng Hao silently continued to cultivate outside, Zio Chang'an's words echoed out amidst the moonlight. Everything was silent for a moment afterward, and then cold laughter rang out. 3 figures shot forward. Their features were indistinct within the darkness of night, but their cultivation bases rippled, making it clear that one of their numbers was of the mid-foundation establishment stage. In the surrounding cultivation clans, even the mid-foundation establishment stage was considered quite powerful. Were it not so, the Zio clan would not have been able to occupy the Spirit Lake for so long. It was only now that Zio Chang'an was reaching the end of his longevity that the current situation had come to be. The 3 figures whistled through the air toward Zio Chang'an. A boom exploded out as the 4 people collided in battle. Zio Chang'an coughed blood, his pale face flying backward like a kite with a severed string. The mid-foundation establishment cultivator laughed coldly and proceeded forward. The other 2 shot toward Meng Hao's shield, laughing. Zio Chang'an was torn between knowing Meng Hao was at a critical juncture and being powerless to intervene. Even burning some of his life force to gain extra power would be useless. As the 2 touched the shield, it rumbled. Within the space of 2 breaths, the shield collapsed. Created by Zio Keifeng at the Qi condensation stage, the shield holding for 3 breaths testified to her outstanding talent. The shield collapsed as the 2 slammed into the lightning mist, screaming. Lightning surrounded them as crackling sounds accompanied their backward flight, blood spewing from their mouths. Expressions of shock covered their faces as their Dao pillars trembled on the verge of collapse. The lightning mist roiled. Its protection extended about 30 meters out from Meng Hao in all directions, creating a no-man's land which no one could enter. Zio Chang'an heaved a sigh of relief. The mid-foundation establishment cultivator with whom he had been battling paused, looking over his shoulder at the lightning mist, astonishment filling his eyes. Within the lightning mist, Meng Hao opened his eyes. They glowed brightly as he frowned and looked down at his last 3 Civ Earth pills. As for his 4th Dao pillar, it was about 90% complete. These pills would be insufficient to complete the last 10%. These Civ Earth pills are only so effective. Perhaps I won't be able to reach the mid-foundation establishment stage after all. A stubborn look shone within his eyes. He knew that his path of cultivation was different from that of others. He had acquired incredible battle prowess, but the cultivation he practiced was much more challenging. Even as he thought of these things, a racket could be heard coming from the outside. Fellow Taoists, this person's cultivation has stirred up such power. I'm afraid that once he emerges, all of our cultivation clans will be at his mercy. Let's take advantage of this opportunity to destroy him now to prevent future troubles. Correct, the Zio clan is weak. Their existence is meaningless. The extermination of such clans is the natural order, it can't be changed. Let's attack together. This lightning mist can't hold up against all of us. The 10 or more foundation establishment cultivators outside began attacking the lightning mist in unison. All of these people were from local cultivator clans. As they attacked, booming sounds lifted up to fill the sky. The lightning mist seethed violently. An evil heart is a useless life. Meng Hao's eyes sparkled icily through the lightning mist. He quickly gathered up the remaining 3 pills and popped them into his mouth. They immediately dissolved, and the cascading moonlight grew stronger, as if a river were pouring down into Meng Hao's body. Though their effectiveness waned, the 4th Tao pillar was nearly complete. Just as the Tao pillar was about to appear in full, Meng Hao suddenly sensed an inexplicable roaring within his body. His expression flickered as he realized that his body was starting to wither, as if his flesh and blood and life force, even his cultivation base, were being sucked into the 4th Tao pillar. He had just unlocked another of the secrets of the perfect foundation. It was with unbridled power that the 4th Tao pillar began of its own will to suck in everything into it. It seemed that the 4th Tao pillar would form at any cost, even if it caused the death of Meng Hao. His face flickered at this sudden turn of events. He had never imagined that something like this would happen. It was at this exact moment that the lightning mist finally collapsed under the attack of the 10 foundation establishment cultivators. They rushed in. Meng Hao eyed them approaching, his face grim. His body was withering and his life force was trickling away. The hair on his head had already begun turning white. His cultivation base was still there, though. Suddenly, an early foundation establishment cultivator appeared in front of him. Before the man could react, Meng Hao's hand shot out and grabbed him by the throat. He squeezed, and the cultivator's eyes filled with disbelief. The man's neck shattered. Even as he died, Meng Hao's body trembled and his eyes filled with a strange light. The man's corpse suddenly began to shrink and wither. Within the blink of an eye, it was a mere skeleton. The man's cultivation base rushed in through Meng Hao's hand and entered the 4th Tao pillar. So that's how it is. Meng Hao's eyes grew brighter. I have a perfect foundation, but when my first 3 Tao pillars formed within the Blood Immortal Legacy Tournament, there was more than enough spiritual energy to absorb, so I couldn't even sense the potency of the Tao pillars. But now, things are clear. After reaching a certain point, the 4th Tao pillar reaches a phase in which only death can stop its progress. When this happens, it will even consume my own life force. The reason is because it can't absorb spiritual energy from the outside world, only from my flesh and blood. Perfection is so potent, but such potency is also a weapon. I've been rejected by the heavens, therefore I must plunder from the living. The bodies of cultivators are filled with spiritual energy that does not belong to heaven and earth. Therefore, it can be pillaged away. Now I understand. It seems that in the future, it will be like this every time I form a new Tao pillar. Today, my 4th Tao pillar will appear. These thoughts ran through Meng Hao's head in an instant. He loosened his grip, then looked around at the surrounding cultivators, his eyes radiating icy cold. His body flashed as he shot toward them. Miserable screams rang out. All of these people had cultivation bases at the mid-foundation establishment level at the highest. Most were at the early foundation establishment stage. Could they possibly match up against Meng Hao? As Meng Hao passed each person, his hand would snake out, and with no effort on his part, the 4th Tao pillar would feed, thirstily sucking in energy. Body after body turned into bones. Before the death of each cultivator, their cultivation base would be sucked rapidly into Meng Hao, consumed by his Tao pillar. Soon, Meng Hao was no longer withered, and his flesh and blood began to rebuild. As Zio Chang'an observed this happening, dread appeared on his face. The cultivators who had moments ago been charging forward suddenly began to retreat at high speed. In their eyes, Meng Hao was no cultivator. He had transformed into some type of evil demon. Wherever he passed, blood-curdling screams could be heard, and he left behind only ragged corpses. Their minds reeled, and expressions of unbridled horror appeared on their faces. What magic is this? What is he doing? This guy, he's sucking up the life and cultivation bases of all those dead fellow Taoists. The remaining 20 or so cultivators were scared witless and retreated in chaos. Meng Hao caught up with one of them. As he placed his hand on the crown of the man's head, a blood-curdling scream echoed out. His body began to shrivel, and then he died. Meng Hao's face was no longer pale and bloodless. It was now ruddy and filled with life. He took a deep breath, and in his mind he suddenly recalled the scene in Patriarch Reliance's Immortal's Cave, when Patriarch Reliance had absorbed the core formation Cultivators 1. To revisit the scene of Patriarch Reliance using the great art of demonic life, check out Chapter 82, The Great Art of Demonic Life. The great art of demonic life, thought Meng Hao, his eyes flickering. It seemed that what he was doing now was very similar indeed to the great art of demonic life that Patriarch Reliance had used. Or perhaps this is some type of enlightenment that comes from being in a kill or be killed situation. The great art of demonic life. Demonic life. Meng Hao sighed inwardly as he suppressed his deeply ingrained Confucian way of thinking. His body flickered with the power of the fourth Tao pillar. He sighed as his hand clasped around the throat of another cultivator. The fourth Tao pillar sucked in the man's cultivation base. Soon, the fourth Tao pillar would complete its circle and be complete. The path of my perfect foundation will be strewn with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. I understand, he sighed again, and yet continued forward without hesitation. His heart did not grow soft. Confucianism would always exist within him, and he would never be truly merciless. However, when the circumstances required, he could act without mercy. Chapter 174, Perfect Mid-Foundation Establishment. Moonlight shone on the savage scene. Xiao Chang'an and the rest of the Xiao clan looked at Meng Hao, terrified. The surrounding cultivators retreated, knowing that hesitation meant death. Meng Hao was faster, hair floating as he pursued them like a specter. He sucked in a cultivation base and life force, then loosened his grip, dropping the shriveled, trembling skeletal body to the ground. It wasn't as if none of the cultivators tried to fight back. Unfortunately, their resistance was futile. They were nothing to him. Before the fourth Tao pillar, Meng Hao easily battled the late foundation establishment stage. Now that his fourth Tao pillar was almost complete, he was on the very threshold of the mid-foundation establishment stage. What could these outcasts resist? It was their doom to be here today, a deadly choice on their part. They had chosen to destroy the lightning mist, and in doing so, had unleashed the spirit of death. Meng Hao was more than half recovered now. His hair was no longer white, nor was his skin withered. Everything that his Tao pillar had sucked away from him was now restored. His fourth Tao pillar emanated a demonic aura, as if it desired to plunder and consume all spiritual power. I am cut off from heaven and earth, so I will take it upon myself to plunder. This potency is perfection. Boom! Meng Hao closed in on two early foundation establishment cultivators. They turned around, roaring as they unleashed the full power of the might of their cultivation bases. They used magical arts, they used magical treasures, going all out against Meng Hao. Boom! Meng Hao stood before one cultivator, palm against his face. A desiccated corpse dropped. His body flickered as another screamed. The remaining watched a man age rapidly, hair whitening and falling, flesh wilting, eyes clouding before death. Meng Hao sighed. He bore no grudge against these people, but they came to destroy him and prevent his breakthrough. Although they were targeting him because of the Xiao clan, the fact was, they were here. To suddenly be facing Meng Hao was simply their fate. Meng Hao understood. His eyes flashed with enlightenment, and he continued to attack without hesitation. He sucked away the life force and cultivation base of an old man of the mid-foundation establishment stage, whereupon a loud roaring filled his body. It emanated out, filling the air, causing everyone to look on in shock. The fleeing cultivators trembled in dread. Everything that was happening was like a horrible dream, a nightmare which they would never be able to forget for the rest of their lives. The image of Meng Hao had been branded indelibly onto their very souls, and would stay with them until their deaths. As the boom rang out, a tremor ran through Meng Hao's body. He suddenly began to emit a golden light. It spread out, causing Meng Hao to appear as if he were covered with golden armor. At the same time, the fourth Tao pillar appeared in full. The roaring was coming from the Tao pillar itself. Up above in the sky, dark clouds began to congeal. It seemed as if within them, an invisible pair of eyes was staring down onto Meng Hao. A feeling like that of tribulation lightning suddenly appeared. It disappeared almost immediately, as if it were simply observing, waiting until core formation to unleash its destructive punishment. Though there was no wind, Meng Hao's hair whipped about his head wildly. With the appearance of his fourth Tao pillar, he had now broken through to the mid-level of foundation establishment. With the power of the perfect foundation, Meng Hao was now the most powerful person of the foundation establishment stage among the 5 sects and 3 clans of the southern domain. The moment he broke through, the blood drained from the faces of the surrounding cultivators, and their bodies trembled. The Tao pillars within their bodies suddenly began to quiver. In fact, cracks appeared on the Tao pillars of some of the cultivators, causing them to cough up blood, faces filled with astonishment. It seemed like their Tao pillars were ashamed to be in the presence of Meng Hao's perfect Tao pillars. With his perfect foundation, he was a sovereign among the foundation establishment stage. His incredible might and power caused the hearts of all other foundation cultivators to tremble and their Tao pillars to become unstable. In fact, because of the influence of Meng Hao's Tao pillars, the trembling cultivators began to prostrate themselves toward him. This was not their idea. It was veneration toward their sovereign from the Tao pillars themselves. Their bodies were not even under their own control as they lowered their heads. Their minds were filled with roaring emptiness. This was true crushing pressure. This was a power that had reached such a level that it created a relationship like that between heaven and earth. In the cultivation world, a crushing pressure is a power that exists because of the vast difference between different cultivation levels. However, this crushing pressure emanating from Meng Hao came from the Tao pillar itself. Perfect Tao pillars can exhibit crushing pressure onto all other Tao pillars. If a cultivator who had completed the circle of foundation establishment had merely fractured Tao pillars, he could do nothing but tremble in front of Meng Hao. This was the power of 4 perfect Tao pillars. It would be hard to imagine the power Meng Hao could wield after he created his 5th, 6th, and even 9th Tao pillars. What crushing pressure would he then be able to employ? At that time, it wouldn't matter if he faced a cracked foundation or even a flawless foundation. They would all be as weak as ants to Meng Hao. After completing 9 perfect Tao pillars, then perhaps Meng Hao would be able to pass into core formation. Meng Hao had no way to predict what that would be like, but his heart filled with increasingly powerful anticipation nonetheless. It was at this time that just outside of the Xiao clan, 2 beams of prismatic light shot through the air. One flickered with blue light, the other white as they flew forward and caught sight of Meng Hao. "So it turns out to be a chosen," said the white-robed youth. The blood demon sect's current Tao child looked down, eyes glowing. They were filled with battle, seemingly kindled into burning. They flashed like lightning as they examined Meng Hao. To the side was the blue-robed young man, the brother of Sang Luo. As he gazed upon Meng Hao, his eyes narrowed and his heart filled with an indescribable sense of danger. At this same moment, in a location not too far away, but not too near, existed an enormous basin in the earth. There were actually 10 such basins, each one filled with richly ornamented buildings and pagodas. Each basin also contained a lake. From a distance this place looked mysterious and dark. This land was none other than one of the 5 great sects of the southern domain, the Blood Demon sect. Within the center of the 10 basins was a tree. One half of the tree was wilted and dry, the other half was lush and flourishing. It was a very bizarre sight, and clearly something beyond ordinary. This tree was a precious treasure of the Blood Demon sect. Underneath the tree, an indistinct figure sat cross-legged. Suddenly, the figure raised its head. Its vision pierced through everything until it reached the Xiao clan and Meng Hao. A smile appeared on its face, and an indistinct murmuring could be heard. "So, it was not in vain that I helped you those 3 times, the indistinct figure said, its voice husky. "This kid has certainly grown up. It seems Ewer is there too. Perhaps this is the tribulation that violet-robed cultivator spoke of the day she was born." Thunder rumbled above in the sky. "The Tao of the heavens is not dead. I shall not enter the yellow springs of the underworld." The figure looked up into the sky, and its face suddenly emitted 2 beams of ferocious, red light. This was none other than the blood-red figure who had appeared that year at the Reliance sect. This was the blood-red demon lord who had flashed through the sky to save Meng Hao from obliteration at the hands of Lord Revelation. 1. If you want to review the 2 previous appearances of the demon lord, check out Chapter 34, Fame from 1,000 years ago, and Chapter 94, You Really Want Me to Come Out. In the air above the Xiao clan, a golden light glittered. The surrounding cultivators trembled in fear. Meng Hao turned his head, his gaze sweeping to fall upon the white-robed cultivator. He could only be described as beautiful. His body was covered with a voluminous white robe, and he emanated a demonic aura. However, in addition to the demonic aura, there was a refined and cultivated air. He floated there, and though he was accompanied by another cultivator, all eyes were on him. Even if there were countless thousands upon thousands of people present, he would be the center of attention. His beauty, coupled with his demonic air, made it such that even most women would have trouble surpassing him. Were he wearing women's clothing, he would be a beauty unmatched in his generation. As Meng Hao's looked upon the white-robed youth, their gazes locked. Instantly, Meng Hao could sense the desire for battle within those eyes. Next to the beautiful blood demon Dao Child was a blue-robed cultivator. His gaze immediately fell upon Sang Luo, who laid entangled in the black net on the ground not too far off. He was just about to spring into action when the white-robed youth held out a hand to stop him. "You're not his match," the white-robed youth smiled. "I find this person very interesting." His smile was warm and calm. Were this person to be wearing women's clothing, this consummately elegant smile would make flowers grow dim. After smiling, the white-robed youth took a step forward. This step landed on air, but as it did, Meng Hao's eyes narrowed. It felt as if the step had landed directly on his heart. His entire condition changed, as if he were suddenly under great pressure. A wave of power rippled out from the white-robed youth, clearly caused by a completed circle of late foundation establishment. "These are my 7 demonic lotus steps. Each step is unbreakable. Take care, fellow Taoist." With a smile, the white-robed youth began to take a second step. His power suddenly surged to immense heights as if the power itself contained his will. It spread out in all directions. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed. As the white-robed youth approached, a strange aura seemed to be building up in the area. It circled around, emanating a mysterious aroma. It smelled pleasant, however, it could cause bewilderment which could lead to total loss of oneself. As the second step descended, Meng Hao began to shake and the gleam in his eye grew sharper. Smiling, the white-robed youth began to take a third step. As it fell, the power in the area grew exponentially stronger. His body seemed to transform into something invincible. It was only the third step, but in Meng Hao's perception, time itself seemed to suddenly whiz by. It was as if the entire world were being replaced by something else. Chapter 175, Li Shiki. Meng Hao felt cut off from everything. The area around him seemed sealed. His cultivation base felt like it would degrade, dropping him to early foundation establishment. At the same time, an incredibly realistic vision appeared in his mind. He returned to Mount Daqing, to Yunji County, to the window of his room, underneath the moonlight. He saw himself sitting there reading. Meng Hao had never experienced such a technique before. His eyes narrowed. The white-robed youth's fourth step was just beginning. As it did, Meng Hao's mind reeled and more visions appeared. He suddenly realized that the state caused by his opponent would be impossible to break once the 7th step was reached. That was the pinnacle, and when that last step descended, his opponent would be able to employ a pressure so intense that he wouldn't need to attack. That pressure contained a power that could sweep away the foundation establishment stage. If the art is unbreakable, I must break the situation. Meng Hao tilted his head and pointed down. The earth seemed to shake, though it was Meng Hao who shook. Ghost images appeared everywhere. The only thing that didn't have a ghost image was Meng Hao. "This is the 8th hex body-sealing finger," said Meng Hao coolly. "Take care, fellow Taoist." He lifted his hand and pointed forward. Suddenly, Meng Hao's body stopped vibrating. The ghost images all overlapped and descended toward the white-robed youth. They merged into his body, and suddenly, a conspicuous ghost image of the young man himself appeared. The 5th step that he had been about to take could no longer be completed. The white-robed youth's mind trembled. He looked at Meng Hao with eyes glowing, his expression dignified. Meng Hao didn't attack. This battle was more of an exchange of techniques, not a battle to the death. Meng Hao stood there indifferently, calmly looking at the young man. After a breath, the white-robed youth recovered. However, the power caused by the overlapping momentum of his steps had dissipated, nullified by Meng Hao. The 7 demonic lotus steps was an art that utilized the power of momentum. Once unleashed, even high-level cultivation bases would have difficulty breaking it. Until now, the white-robed youth had never encountered a foundation establishment cultivator who could break the 7 demonic lotus steps. Not even Dao children of the other sects or clans were able to. But today, in this place, he had witnessed an unprecedented occurrence. His eyes shined with strange light as his face filled with respect. This was an esteem that only powerful experts of the same generation would feel for each other. To receive without giving is not a principle by which I live, said Meng Hao coolly. I also have an attack to share. Please prepare. He lifted his left hand, using the nail of his thumb to slice his middle finger. Blood flowed out, causing his middle finger to become crimson. His hand moved in a casual motion, but his eyes were filled with ferocity. Observers saw nothing, but the white-robed youth's pupils constricted instantly. Everything turned blood-red. His expression flickered as fatal danger surged up in him. His right hand shot up to slap his bag of holding. A branch appeared in his hand upon which grew 3 withered leaves and 3 luxuriant leaves. He waved it in front of him. No sound could be heard, but faint ripples circled out. Meng Hao gave a bored snort and retreated backward 3 paces. As he did, his power began to decline, so he stopped and took a step forward. The step descended, seeming to trample directly on the heart of the white-robed youth whose mind shook. His body swayed, as if a massive, invisible force were pushing down on it. He retreated backward a few paces, the blood draining from his face despite the aid of his magical item. As the color slowly returned to his face, he gave Meng Hao a deep look. Senior, I am Li Shiki. It seemed this white-robed youth actually had a girl's name. Li Shiki's name in Chinese is Chinese letter. Li Shikai. Li is a common family name. She means poem. Qi means fine jade. He stared at Meng Hao as he asked in a soft voice, Fellow Taoist, would it be possible for me to inquire as to your illustrious name? Meng Hao got an odd feeling when looking at the white-robed youth. There was something strange about him. He thought for a moment, then replied, Meng Hao. Brother Meng, the person you have in your custody is actually a blood relative of my junior brother. I hope you can release him. If he did anything to offend you, I offer my sincere apologies. Meng Hao looked at blue-robed youth who stood by Li Shiki. He was currently looking at Sang Luo off in the distance. Meng Hao raised his right hand and the black net loosened. Sang Luo, face pale, shot away with all the power he could muster. Meng Hao's hat pursued him at top speed. Don't run away, Meng Hao, how could you do such a thing? The meat jelly roared angrily as it shot after Sang Luo. You can't do that, it's immoral. You can't just let him go. I haven't rescued him from the path of evil yet. Sang Luo's body trembled as he raced to the side of the blue-robed cultivator. His face was covered with terror as he clutched at his older brother's clothes and stared in horror at the approaching hat. Li Shiki stared in shock at the hat. The meat jelly's voice suddenly sounded surprised. What are you looking at? You're a female. Heavens, you look like a guy, but you're actually a girl. Strange, very strange. No rod, no rod. It returned to Meng Hao, plopping down onto his head and once again changing color to bright green. Li Shiki's face suddenly looked extremely unsightly as she glared at the hat, and then Meng Hao. All the good feelings from moments before suddenly evaporated. Meng Hao made a wry smile. The meat jelly had suddenly made everything very clear. Meng Hao suddenly had an acute understanding of why people called the meat jelly ultimate vexation. Ignoring the looks on the faces of Meng Hao and Li Shiki, it started to prattle on, apparently preparing to talk for at least 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. Strange, so strange. You're actually a female. Huh. In the midst of its excitement, the meat jelly seemed to have found something else interesting. It looked off into the distance. It was at this exact moment that off in the blood demon sect, sitting cross-legged underneath the strange tree, the demon lord's body suddenly quivered. He immediately retracted his vision, cutting off all connection to the outside world. Damn it, said the indistinct image of the demon lord, panting. How could that abominable thing have appeared? Didn't his excellency suppress it? And yet, there it is, attached to the body of a disciple of the demon-sealing sect. I cannot get entangled with it. According to the legends, there were many powerful experts in ancient times who were driven insane by it. It looks weak, though. It must not have been able to sense me. Back in the Zio clan mountain village, the meat jelly hat gazed off into the distance. It seemed to be lost in thought for a moment, after which its body flickered, and it looked back at Li Shiki. Li Shiki gave a cold snort and then glared angrily at Meng Hao. Without another word, she spun and flew off. The blue-robed cultivator gave a dry cough, then picked up Sang Luo and transformed into a colorful beam that shot off into the distance. You're leaving, little girl. Don't leave, I haven't finished talking. Meng Hao's face once again filled with a dark expression. The surrounding cultivators wanted to leave. Unfortunately, their Dao pillars trembled and they were incapable of even moving. They stared nervously at Meng Hao. From this day forward, none of you are permitted to step a foot into the Zio clan, said Meng Hao coolly. He flicked his sleeve, unbinding the cultivators. They immediately gave deep bows to Meng Hao and pledged to follow his instructions. After that, they fled at top speed. When they were gone, pale-faced Xiao Cheng'an approached. Clasping hands, he bowed deeply to Meng Hao. "Many thanks, benefactor." All of the Xiao clan members approached and began kowtowing to Meng Hao. Xiao Keifeng stared at him blankly for a moment, and then nodded. Meng Hao looked around at the Xiao clan. "I can't stay here," he said gently. "I must leave in a few days. The only help I can provide is what I've already done." "It's enough," said Xiao Chang'an, bowing deeply. "Fear of benefactor will keep the Xiao clan safe for dozens of years to come. Once the Xiao clan produces another foundation establishment cultivator, then our position will be secured permanently." The death aura which emanated from his body had grown stronger. Most likely, he would reach the end of his life within a year. Meng Hao said nothing. After a long moment he nodded, then returned into the lightning mist. 3 days later, Meng Hao chose to leave. Before departing, he severed 2 vines and left them in the spirit lake. He helped Xiao Keifeng to brand them to herself. In the future, they would belong to the Xiao clan. Xiao Keifeng watched with a smile as Meng Hao left. Her eyes followed him as he disappeared into the distance. Who knew how long his shadow would rest on her heart? Her gaze rested on the spot where he had disappeared. She knew inside that there was no possibility of anything happening between the two of them. Xiao Chang'an looked at Xiao Keifeng and sighed. His body seemed even weaker in the early morning sun. He was only growing older and older. Several days later, Meng Hao sped through the sky, flying along the border territory between the Blood Demon sect and the Solitary Sword sect. A frown covered his face because of the incessant yammering of the meat jelly hat. It hadn't stopped talking at all during the previous days. A female, wahaha, it turned out she was a girl. "Meng Hao, don't you think it's strange? Hey, why aren't you saying anything? You can't do that, it's immoral. It turns out you fought with a girl. Heavens. You know, I'm an elder of the senior generation with ever-changing forms. How can you treat me this way? Acting like this is very wrong, very immoral." Veins of blood filled Meng Hao's eyes, along with a look of despair. He really couldn't deal with this type of torment. The hat's endless chattering was enough to drive a person crazy. Meng Hao could feel his temper growing worse and worse. But attacking the meat jelly was useless. Cursing it did nothing. It couldn't be thrown away. It was stuck to him like dog skin plaster, seemingly attached to him for life. Meng Hao couldn't think of any other alternative than to simply go insane. He proceeded forward wearily. Suddenly, his eyes flickered as he caught sight of 8 bright beams shooting toward him. They were all cultivators of the foundation establishment stage. The beams of light were all the color of blood. Several of the cultivators were maintaining a spell, within which was the indistinct image of some sort of enormous blood-colored beast. It floated above them as they proceeded forward. Seeing these 8 cultivators, Meng Hao's eyes flashed, and he suddenly spoke to the meat jelly. "You say you have ever-changing forms. I don't believe you." "You don't believe me," cried the meat jelly furiously. It seemed incapable of accepting this. Its dignity and honor had been trampled upon. This chapter was sponsored by David Fan, Eric Archer, Robert Kunze, and Gary Cosby. Chapter 176, Believe Your Granny. Meng Hao planned to speak placatingly, but opted for scorn and disbelief. "If you can transform into a shiny bag of holding that obviously contains a precious treasure, then I'll believe you," he said. He worked hard to make himself sound as antagonistic as possible. In rage, the meat jelly transformed into a shining golden bag. A square cauldron and 4 circulating demonic swords were visible within. The 4 swords revolved around the cauldron, and at a single glance, it was obvious that it was a precious treasure. Even more realistic was how the cauldron and 4 swords seemed to be trying to push their way out of the bag of holding, as if they wanted to escape. "Well, what do you think?" The voice of the meat jelly emanated out from the bag of holding. Inside, he was surprised, but on the outside, a look of disdain covered his face. "There's no glow." There was a rustling sound, and even as the words left his mouth, the bag of holding began to emit a blinding glow which shot up into the sky. The golden light shined up, instantly catching the attention of the 8 cultivators. Immediately, they flew in Meng Hao's direction. "Do you believe me, N?" came the voice of the meat jelly from within the bag of holding. Before it could finish speaking, Meng Hao grabbed the bag of holding and threw it toward the approaching cultivators. "Believe your granny." Meng Hao had been raised not to curse, but couldn't help it. He shot away from the meat jelly as quickly as possible. He threw the glowing, golden bag away with all his cultivation power. As it neared the approaching 8 cultivators, they stared open-mouthed. They all had slightly different expressions. Some were suspicious, Some were cautious, some even looked pleasantly surprised. However, each and every one reached out with outstretched arms to snatch the bag of holding. "You tricked me, that pisses me off," sounded out the voice of the meat jelly. Just when it was about to be grabbed by one of the cultivators, it vanished. Then it reappeared off in the distance, directly on Meng Hao's head. It once again transformed into a green hat. Popping sounds rang as hat after hat piled up on his head high into the air. The stack towered above Meng Hao. The 8 cultivators looked on dumbfounded. They had never seen something like this in their entire lives. Meng Hao's face grew even more unsightly. He felt like he was about to go nuts. If the meat jelly took this shape, then he would be the center of attention no matter where he went. "Fellow Taoist with the green hats," said one of the cultivators coldly, a middle-aged man with a frown. "This is blood demon sect territory. Outsiders are not welcome. Even less welcome are people who come here to make fools of us. Take your green hat and get the hell out of here." Meng Hao had just been about to leave when the words reached his ears. He suddenly stopped, turning to look at the 8 cultivators. His eyes shone fiercely. At the moment, he was in a horrific mood, and these words did not please him whatsoever. "You turn back," said the middle-aged cultivator coldly. "In that case, why don't you leave your eyes with me after you leave? With those green hats, you'll be a laughingstock anyway." With that, he and his companions shot toward Meng Hao. "Screw off!" Meng Hao waved his sleeve at them. The power of his cultivation base exploded out. A massive wind screamed out and then slammed into them. Booming filled the air, and blood sprayed from the mouths of the 8 patrolling blood demon sect disciples. Their bodies trembled. A look of disbelief covered the face of the man who had taunted Meng Hao, and his pupils constricted. From what he could see, Meng Hao was at the mid-foundation establishment stage, but his attack just now had been filled with the might like that of the late foundation establishment stage. Blood oozed out of his mouth as he skidded backward in retreat. When he saw the cold look in Meng Hao's eyes, his heart shook. Realizing he had been rash, the middle-aged cultivator said, "Fellow Taoist, this." Even as he began to speak, however, Meng Hao's eyes shone with even more ferocious iciness. The man's face fell. He and his companions turned into beams of prismatic light that shot away into the distance. When they were far away from Meng Hao, they finally came to a stop and exchanged glances. "That guy is just too aggressive. Where did he come from? Elder brother, let's report him to Master. Master will surely dispatch some people to apprehend him." "Correct, elder brother, this is blood demon sect territory. Can we really allow that guy to just run amok?" "Shut the hell up," growled the middle-aged man, his face dark and unreadable. "He's young, and with just a single sweep of his hand, look at what he did to us. Do you really think he's just some random person? He's obviously not a cultivator of the solitary sword sect. With war brewing between our sect and the solitary sword sect, we can't afford to provoke the wrath of additional sects. He's obviously just passing through and doesn't want to make enemies. That's why he went easy on us. All of you shut your mouths. Forget about what happened here. There will always be friction among cultivators like us. There's no need to report some trifling incident like this to the sect." Having made his decision, he continued on into the distance, his fellow cultivators in tow. After they were some ways away, the vines on the ground beneath them that they hadn't noticed this entire time burrowed into the earth and disappeared. Back in Meng Hao's location, Meng Hao stamped his foot onto the ground. The soil seethed as the dark red vines emerged to sway back and forth in front of him. Moments later, they transformed into a small, dark red fruit, which he placed into his bag of holding. Finally, he turned his attention to the hat on his head. "You can't do that, it's wrong. If you let them go, you should trust them completely. You can't secretly dispatch something to follow them. That's wrong. That's immoral. I just remembered something. You cussed at me just now." "Cussing is wrong, it's immoral. My granny never did anything to offend you. Why did you have to bring her up? It's very strange. What relationship do you have with her? Unless—" Suddenly, the meat jelly's pedantic voice filled with a strange tone. "Unless the two of you." Meng Hao ignored it. He slapped his bag of holding to produce a set of clothing. He ripped off some strips of fabric and stuffed them into his ears. Immediately, the meat jelly's voice became quieter. But then, the meat jelly gave a dry cough. It started to talk, and this time, its voice could be heard directly inside of Meng Hao's head. Meng Hao's expression was somewhat haggard. He stared off into nothing for a while, then finally sighed and tossed the strips of cloth away. "Now I know why people call you Ultimate Vexation," he said. Immediately, the meat jelly began to tremble with excitement. Why? This name was given to me a very, very, very long time ago by an old friend. I asked him about it many times, but he would never tell me what it means. The meat jelly's full and undivided attention was now focused on Meng Hao. Meng Hao didn't say anything. Instead, he pondered why the person who named the meat jelly wouldn't explain the meaning of the name. Then he thought of the meat jelly's long-windedness, and he shivered. He understood. By providing an answer regarding the name, it would give the meat jelly a conversation topic that would certainly last for months. The thought of that made his scalp go numb. Anyone who had no experience dealing with the meat jelly couldn't comprehend the nature of the torment it brought. He decided to change the topic. "With you looking like this, we really can't proceed onward," said Meng Hao. "Is there any way you can take some form other than a pile of hats?" He was careful in his wording, fearful of agitating the thing. He could only imagine what it would look like if it decided to become a mountain of green hats perched on top of his head. What would happen then? His tone was non-argumentative, but inside, his heart was filled with helplessness. He thought of the blood mastiff and suddenly missed it terribly. Unfortunately, it was sleeping now. Actually, Meng Hao's words seemed to excite the meat jelly. If I'm not a hat, then what shape should I take?" Meng Hao was used to this, so he didn't say anything at first. He sat cross-legged within the mountain forest and retrieved the time-refining Jade page. He cast his spiritual sense into it and began to study the contents. Some time passed, and then Meng Hao's eyes glittered. He began to mutter to himself. "Time of spring and autumn requires a spring tree and the frost of autumn. The fire of midwinter, the spirit of summer. Refine the 4 seasons, fuse with the cultivation base. Refine the 4 seasons again to produce a small sword. This sword must be carefully nurtured. With enlightenment of time, the veins of 100 years can fill the sword. After the 100 years, 1,000 years will pass and it will take shape. In 10,000 years, it will appear to shake heaven and earth, the first sword of time." Meng Hao frowned as he gazed at the Jade page. The sword contained no small might, but the time involved in its creation seemed too vast. "Hanbei is really focused on this sword, so it can't really take that much time, can it? There must be other methods that can be used to speed up the appearance of the sword." Lost in thought, Meng Hao thought to the 3rd Jade page that the meat jelly had swallowed, as well as the 1st Jade page, which had been sucked back into the circular cauldron. The answer must be on the 3rd page. Too bad this damned meat jelly ate it. Meng Hao lifted his head and looked at the meat jelly. About an hour had passed since he began studying the time-refining information. Of course, the meat jelly had been talking the entire time. "What do I change into? What do I change into? What do I change into?" It had flown off of Meng Hao's head and was now hopping back and forth in front of him. It looked very excited. "Can you change into that Jade page you swallowed?" Meng Hao said suddenly. Okay," it agreed and then immediately changed its mind. Wait a second, what are you trying to pull? No way, it's mine, you're not getting your hands on it." Chapter 177, Using Its Strength. Meng Hao's eyes narrowed when he heard the words. Could it be that things it swallows aren't digested, just collected? "Trying to fool me? Quit dreaming, HMPH. The meat jelly's tone became sagely. "Child, you've walked too far down the path of evil. Repent and be saved. Change into what left the most profound impression on you," Meng Hao said, still thinking about what the meat jelly had revealed. He had to figure out a way to trick the meat jelly into coughing up the Jade page. "No need to think. The thing with the most profound effect on me is this." The meat jelly gnashed its teeth. There was a popping sound and suddenly it transformed into a brightly colored parrot, half the size of his arm, glistening as if wet. It was emaciated, with curved beak and triangular eyes. It had a somewhat perverted demeanor and seemed to be filled with an immoral air. It stood there in front of Meng Hao, looking at him with its perverted, triangular eyes. It lowered its head and pecked a few times at its body. Meng Hao gaped at the parrot. In his entire life, he had never seen such a perverted-looking bird. Its triangular eyes and the brightly colored feathers which covered its body were especially strange. The parrot coughed drily, looking at Meng Hao out of the corner of its eye. "This is what left the most profound impression on me. That damned bird. In my last life, I just wasn't able to get it to give in and convert. In this life, I will definitely convert it. That immoral, perverted creature who likes things with fur and feathers." The meat jelly sounded like it was gnashing its teeth. Its appearance and words just now instantly made this form seem even more lifelike. Seeing the parrot and hearing the words caused Meng Hao to take a deep breath. He thought back to the day he had almost put on the blood-colored mask and had heard a bird cry come from the copper mirror. He thought about how fervently the copper mirror would attack furred creatures. His mind spun with various images. He didn't really understand. Just what was this bird that the meat jelly kept talking about? Meng Hao hesitated before retrieving the copper mirror from his bag of the cosmos. "You're talking about this?" he asked. The instant it appeared, the meat jelly parrot let out a squawk. Wings fluttering, it shot forward and grabbed the copper mirror in its claws and began to viciously peck at it. "Damn it, yes, this is it. I can sense its aura inside. I'll peck you to death, you damned mass-murdering bird. Peck you, peck you." The meat jelly parrot seemed to have gone crazy. Its feathers stood on end as it squawked and pecked at the copper mirror. Meng Hao watched in a daze, recalling when he acquired it and discovered its ability. He had always wondered about its fantastical nature but never discovered clues. Meng Hao felt like he was going to be quickly driven insane by the meat jelly parrot. It was squawking madly and radiated a look of hatred. Meng Hao himself felt like venting a bit. He suddenly had an intense desire to meet the parrot that resided within the copper mirror. The parrot must be incredibly extraordinary to be able to make the meat jelly so angry. Maybe when it comes out it can take care of the meat jelly for me. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he suddenly reached an understanding. Didn't the meat jelly say earlier that when I reach core formation the parrot can come out? Perhaps. It's like the mastiff, a type of weapon spirit. "You fight back," the meat jelly parrot blustered as it pecked at the mirror. "I won't let you off this time. I'm going to convert you. Ha ha ha, you can't come out, you can't come out. I can piss you off as much as I want and you can't come out." The meat jelly quivered with excitement. However, it was at this point that the mirror suddenly flickered and the meat jelly let out a cry. It released its claws and flew away. The copper mirror flew after it, repeatedly sending out invisible attack rays. Meng Hao watched on contentedly, doing nothing to stop the copper mirror. However, it quickly became apparent that the meat jelly wasn't being hurt at all. He flicked his sleeve, returning the copper mirror to the bag of the cosmos. The meat jelly parrot flapped its wings as it flew back over and landed on Meng Hao's shoulder. It began to chatter into his ear like usual. At least this form looked better than a stack of hats. Meng Hao's desire to reach core formation was now even more intense. He took a deep breath. Ignoring the prattle of the meat jelly, he flew into the air and shot off toward the horizon. "The poison within me is a big problem," he thought. "I really need to figure a way to infiltrate the Violet Fate sect and see if I can find a way to become Grandmaster Pill Demon's disciple. Then I can get rid of the poison once and for all." His eyes glittered as he proceeded onward. He had considered this the last time he was in a city controlled by the Violet Fate sect. The spring and autumn tree could only alleviate the symptoms of the poison and buy him some time. The only way to truly dispel the poison was to get into the Violet Fate sect. Besides, if I want to form a perfect gold core, I first need to have a violet core. To form a violet core requires a suitable technique. That technique is none other than the Violet Fate sect's violet chi from the east. Meng Hao frowned. It was a good idea, but he couldn't think of any way to infiltrate the Violet Fate sect. He had offended too many people there. There was Wu Dinkyu and Chu Yuyan, as well as the disciples he had met in the state of Zhao, who were surely members of the inner sect by now. "I need to switch identities. I need a way to become someone else," he sighed. Obviously, it was all a flight of fancy that should just be forgotten. Suddenly, his expression changed. He looked at the bag of the cosmos and his eyes shined with intelligence. "The mask? If I had an appearance-changing mask, then I could do it. As for a mask, I do have one. But who knows if the mask has that power? Furthermore, my cultivation base needs to be at core formation before I can use it. Also, what if the mask just doesn't work that way?" He slowly turned his head to look at the chattering parrot on his shoulder. His eyes glittered. "What are you looking at me like that for?" said the meat jelly parrot with surprise, staring at him. Meng Hao ignored it. He flew down to the ground and sat cross-legged. He smacked the bag of the cosmos and retrieved the blood-colored mask. As soon as the meat jelly saw the mask, its eyes went wide and it flapped its wings violently, flying around Meng Hao in a circle and letting out raucous squawks. "What's that? What's that? Heavens, what is that evil thing? Child, you've trodden too far down the path of wickedness. Fear not, I can pull you back. I will convert you." "Eee, what's that inside? Why am I seeing an old man? Wah, this old man looks so miserable. Child, you can't do this. It's wrong. It's immoral. This old guy has performed possession. Old man, that's immoral. That's wrong." Meng Hao poured spiritual sense into the mask and was immediately able to see the blood-red form of the mastiff. It lay there sleeping, its aura majestic and boundless and growing even stronger. Meng Hao looked at it, and his expression grew soft. "Hurry up and awaken," he said with spiritual sense. The mastiff's body twitched and warmth emanated from it, a reply of sorts. Meng Hao's smile grew warmer, and he thought back to everything that had happened during the Blood Immortal Legacy Tournament. "I'm waiting for you to wake up," said Meng Hao softly. His eyes flashed as they fell upon the flag with 3 streamers. He was fully aware that his cultivation base was not high enough to use the flag. He could only pour some spiritual sense into it and brand it to himself. Core formation. If I can become a core formation expert, then I should be able to use this flag. Last, Meng Hao touched the Li clan patriarch with his spiritual sense. He sat recoiled in the corner, his body illusory and transparent, and his face wan and sallow. It seemed as if at any moment he might dissipate into nothing. As Meng Hao looked at him, he raised his head and glared back. His gaze was as fierce as ever, sinister to the extreme. "There's a question I can't stop thinking about," said Meng Hao calmly. "Why did you help Li Dai? The first time I saw you was in the 6th Matrix and you were a statue. The second time I saw you, you had become Li Dai's blood divinity. Why?" The Li clan patriarch laughed coldly, refusing to respond. "It turns out you possess the blood divinity. That makes me curious. Before possessing the blood divinity, who were you?" His voice was as calm as ever. However, when the Li clan patriarch heard his words, his heart shook. His identity was his biggest secret and no one had any clue about it. Even Meng Hao could only speculate about his relationship to Li Dai. Any details would be difficult to ascertain. The Li clan patriarch laughed disdainfully. "You want to know? Beg me for a year, then maybe I'll think about it." He didn't care about anything, not even death. After facing the loneliness of the blood immortal legacy zone for 4,000 years, he had incredible strength of will. Even Meng Hao's previous threatening methods couldn't really affect him now. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. He glanced one last time at the weak form of the Li clan patriarch, and then narrowed his eyes and retracted his spiritual sense. He gazed at the surface of the blood-colored mask, and then looked at the meat jelly. "You like to convert people, right?" asked Meng Hao. "No," the meat jelly responded solemnly. "I don't like to convert people, I like to persuade them. Understand, persuade." Meng Hao sighed. The old man in this mask lived a life of extreme wickedness. He's performed the most evil of acts and is completely corrupted by immorality. He loves to bully the weak and is extremely vile in all ways. I captured him and put him in here out of mercy because I wanted to admonish him. However, his magic is just too powerful. I just can't influence him." Before he could even finish talking, the meat jelly parrot's eyes grew wide and it began to fume. "Do you dare? This type of person should only be converted by me. I hate nothing more than evildoers. I must convert him." It suddenly looked extremely excited at the prospect of converting a bad guy such as this. Without waiting for a response from Meng Hao, its body flashed and it entered the blood-colored mask. This chapter was sponsored by Robert Kunze, Felix Firmbach, Sandro Jurkin, Joseph Apor, Michael Alfredo Velasquez Perez, Tijandra Johans and Samir Abdulrabba. Chapter 178, An Old Friend. The meat jelly cried out as it entered the mask. "THTH, that's a Yellow Springs 9 Burials flag, 3 streamers, evil, profound evil." The stern meat jelly approached the gaping Li patriarch. "Old man, it turns out you are evil incarnate. In the name of justice, I shall convert you. You can't be like this, it's immoral. You won't meet a good end this way." Meng Hao coughed lightly and then put the mask away. He let out a deep sigh, and his eyes glittered sharply. Yellow Springs 9 Burials flag. Lost in thought, Meng Hao was just about to fly out of the concealment of the forest when he stopped. He hid his cultivation base and narrowed his eyes. His mid-foundation establishment cultivation let him contend with Dao children. However, he had no reason to do so. This area was the border region between the Blood Demon sect and the Solitary Sword sect. He must be very cautious and not get carried away. He resolved to not forget this. After about 10 breaths, several colorful beams appeared overhead. 10 cultivators appeared, each and every one standing on a flying sword. They all wore identical outfits and looked very impressive and dignified. Their passage sent a roaring sound into the air. 3 in front were most conspicuous. They wore robes of interlocking black and white. Sheathed swords were strapped to their backs, and the sword auras beneath their feet shined brightly, seemingly capable of slicing effortlessly through anything. One of the 3 was a stately-looking man of about 40 years of age. He was at the late foundation establishment stage, and as he flew, his black hair whipped around him, interspersed with occasional strands of white hair. Behind him was a young man of about 30 years of age with thin lips and a harsh expression. He had curved eyes like a red phoenix that radiated coldness. He was incredibly good-looking, but seemed cold-blooded in nature. The sword under his feet issued a frigid pressure. He was at the mid-foundation establishment stage, and seemed to be the picture of imposing power. The last person appeared to be about 27 or 28. His features were ordinary, but he radiated an air of righteousness. He was only at the early foundation establishment stage, but his eyes glowed brightly. He seemed to be filled with a powerful aura. When Meng Hao caught sight of him, his mind flooded with memories. This man filled with righteousness was none other than Meng Hao's elder brother from the Reliance sect, who had been taken away by the Solitary Sword sect. Years had passed. Here stood Chen Fan. It seemed a long time since they had parted. The Reliance sect was no more, and the state of Zhao was gone. Meng Hao wondered if Chen Fan was still the same person he had been before. 1. There were a handful of chapters in which Chen Fan appeared. Perhaps the most relevant is Chapter 34, Fame from 1,000 years ago, in which he befriends Meng Hao. He was silent as he observed the group of people. They were all disciples of the number 1 sect in the southern domain, the Solitary Sword sect. It wasn't anything remarkable for the Solitary Sword sect to appear here. After all, this area was a region of contention between the Blood Demon sect and the Solitary Sword sect. Meng Hao knew about the constant friction between the two great sects, as well as the occasional skirmishes that occurred. Just as the group of people was about to disappear in the distance, Meng Hao's expression flickered, and he looked back up into the sky. Soon he caught sight of 10 beams of blood-red light whistling through the air. They were moving at top speed, kicking up a wind that buffeted the mountain forest below. Above the group of 10 people were a handful of enormous creatures, flying along with them. These 10 cultivators had grim expressions, filled with death. Killing intent circled around them and up to the beasts above them, who seemed to be feeding on it. The beasts roared and howled. These, of course, were disciples of the Blood Demon sect. Their speed was incredible as they passed over Meng Hao. From the direction they were heading, it seemed they were pursuing the Solitary Sword sect cultivators. As they disappeared over the horizon, Meng Hao emerged from the forest. Muttering to himself, he looked at the direction the cultivators from the two sects had gone. Instead of flying after them, he stayed down into the cover of the trees to follow. Meng Hao sped through the trees for the time it takes 2 incense sticks to burn. It was then that he heard the sounds of explosions ringing out. He increased his speed, and before long, caught sight of the Solitary Sword sect and the Blood Demon sect cultivators locked in fierce magical combat. Booms echoed out, and ripples of magic spread out through the air. The Solitary Sword sect people, a single sword was an instrument of death, incomparably sharp. As for the Blood Demon sect people, their magic was ever-changing. Surprisingly, it wasn't dominated by the color of blood. Rather, they used an endless stream of techniques. The phantom beasts they controlled possessed extraordinary strength. There were only 3 of them, but they charged about violently, making them impossible to approach. Neither group had core formation experts. The strongest was pseudo-core stage. The rest were all of foundation establishment. They fought back and forth wildly, surrounded by a bloody glow. Meng Hao watched as a few among them perished. At the moment, the Blood Demon sect seemed to have the upper hand. Suddenly, though, the eyes of the pseudo-core cultivator from the Solitary Sword sect flickered with a cold light. "Solitary Sword spell," he shouted. The Solitary Sword sect disciples, including Chen Fan, flew toward him. Their swords glittered shockingly. In the blink of an eye, the sword merged together to form a single enormous sword, 300 meters in length. The massive sword shot toward the 3 phantom beasts. Explosion rang out in all directions. The phantom beasts trembled and roared, and then one by one disintegrated into nothing. The massive sword then transformed into hundreds of glowing sword beams, which shot toward the remaining Blood Demon sect disciples as well as toward the ground where Meng Hao stood. Meng Hao frowned and then leaped up into the air. He waved his right hand, causing a gale-force wind to spring up. The approaching sword beams instantly broke apart into pieces. Meng Hao's appearance and his quick dispatching of the sword beams immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding Solitary Sword cultivators. This was especially so of the harsh-looking young man of the mid-foundation establishment stage, whose eyes radiated iciness. The sword beams that had shot toward Meng Hao just now had been under his control. "This Blood Demon sect villain harbors evil," said the young man coolly. "Junior brothers, hear my command. Snuff him out." He seemed disinclined to even verify Meng Hao's identity. His appearance here was enough for the young man to pass judgment on him. The older cultivator frowned but didn't intervene. The eyes of the surrounding cultivators flickered with coldness as they charged toward Meng Hao. At this moment, however, Chen Fan caught sight of Meng Hao. After a moment passed, his eyes filled with joy. "Stop," he cried, rushing forward with all the speed of the early foundation establishment stage. He passed the others, flying directly up to Meng Hao. "This is my junior brother," he cried excitedly. Everyone stopped. His expression was one of intense happiness, almost trance-like, as he gazed at Meng Hao and recalled the past. Meng Hao looked at Chen Fan and smiled. Chen Fan's expression and words were filled with sincerity, and now Meng Hao was certain. He hadn't changed. He was the same person he had been 7 or 8 years ago. Meng Hao took a deep breath and then said, "Greetings, elder brother." He clasped hands and bowed deeply. Chen Fan laughed. He looked a bit different than he had 7 or 8 years ago, but his personality was the same. He stepped forward and embraced Meng Hao. "Junior brother Chen," said the harsh-looking young man with a hypocritical smile. "How come I've never seen this junior brother of yours? I didn't know the solitary sword sect had a disciple such as this." His voice was filled with sinister accusation. Chen Fan frowned, standing protectively in front of Meng Hao. "Elder brother Zhou, he's not a solitary sword sect disciple. He's my junior brother from when I was in the Reliance sect." Meng Hao didn't say anything, and his expression was the same as ever. He wanted to see how Chen Fan would handle the situation. "So he's a disciple from a tiny backwater sect," said Zhou, his voice sinister and yet leisurely. "He would normally be inconsequential, yet here he is spying on us. He must take responsibility." The surrounding solitary sword sect disciples exchanged glances, then moved backward silently. It seems this was not the first time they had seen conflict erupt between Zhou and Chen Fan. The middle-aged pseudo-core cultivator sighed, looking at the two of them with an annoyed expression, and then glancing down at Meng Hao. "Take responsibility," said Chen Fan coolly. His eyes were cold as he stood there in front of Meng Hao. "Zhou Shanyu too. Zhou Shanyu's name in Chinese is Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letters. Yu Shanyu. Zhou is a common family name. Shan means mountain. Yue also means mountain. I would very much like to know exactly how you expect my junior brother to take responsibility. With me here, which one of you dares to cause problems for him?" He slapped his bag of holding, and a small black blade appeared, about the size of a hand. It flew up to circle around his head. Meng Hao's expression changed to one of shock the instant he saw the blade appear. So did the faces of the surrounding cultivators. The pseudo-core stage man gasped. Zhou Shanyu's face immediately grew extremely unsightly. A look of jealousy filled his eyes as he glared at Chen Fan. His heart, however, filled with dread. The blade emanated the fearsome power of core formation. "Zhou Shanyu, I'm waiting for your response," said Chen Fan calmly. Chapter 179, Sect Brothers. "That's my father's flying dagger," Zhou Shanyu snorted coldly, staring at it. "It's a gift from my master," replied Chen Fan, his expression cold. Immediately, Zhou Shanyu's expression darkened. He flicked his sleeve and began to move toward Chen Fan. "To take responsibility is simple," he said as he strode forward. "I want both of his eyes. Let's see if you dare to try to kill me. If you do, you have my respect. But how will you explain that to your master, my father?" Meng Hao watched calmly as the scene unfolded. In front of him, Chen Fan gazed coldly at the approaching Zhou Shanyu. He lifted his right hand, and the flying dagger immediately began to glow. Everything seemed ready to dissolve into chaos. Zhou Shanyu proceeded forward, a savage expression covering his face. "You attack me over an outsider. To you, he's an outsider, but to me, he's a junior brother." Chen Fan waved his hand, and the flying dagger shot toward Zhou Shanyu. Zhou Shanyu's hair stood on end, and he suddenly stopped moving. The black dagger had come to a stop right in front of his face. "Don't push me, Zhou Shanyu," Chen Fan said softly. Meng Hao was just about to take a step forward when the pseudo-core stage cultivator suddenly said, "Just what do you two think you're doing? Zhou Shanyu, stand down. Chen Fan, if this is your junior brother from your former sect, then you'll need to vouch for him. You will be responsible for all his future mistakes." The words obviously contained a threat. While it seemed on the surface that he was trying to smooth over the situation, he was actually making a small matter into a bigger one. Meng Hao understood what was being said. He laughed coldly. "My affairs have nothing to do with my elder brother," he said. "If you don't take your words back voluntarily, Your Excellency, then I'll be forced to make you take them back." His voice was ice-cold. When the middle-aged man heard them, his eyes grew icy and he stared back at Meng Hao. Chen Fan, of course, had never imagined that Meng Hao would dare to speak. Without another word, he flashed an incantation sign, and the flying dagger reappeared at his side. "Chen Fan, it's not that I didn't try to give you some face. Your junior brother here needs to be taught a lesson." With a grim smile, the middle-aged man flicked his sleeve and began to move toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. His cultivation base had 4 Tao pillars. He could contend with the late foundation establishment stage and could even stand up to Tao children with flawless foundations. There was no need to even mention this middle-aged man who clearly had a cracked foundation at best. Meng Hao could slay him with ease. The man was elder brother Chen's fellow disciple. However, Meng Hao couldn't allow threats that could affect Chen Fan later. That was why he had tried to separate himself from Chen Fan. The surrounding solitary sword sect disciples watched on with cold smiles, eyeing Meng Hao with looks of disdain. They obviously thought Meng Hao was being arrogant and conceited to think he could stand up to someone who had completed the great circle of foundation establishment. The surrounding disciples thought, I never imagined elder brother Chen would make friends with someone who so easily overestimates himself. He's relying on elder brother Chen's presence, like a fox exploiting the might of a tiger. 1. The idiom of the fox and the tiger is a very common Chinese expression which means to bully others by flaunting one's powerful connections. He's looking to die. A sinister smile appeared on Zhou Shanyu's face. He moved backward a few paces, contentedly watching the commotion. Meng Hao looked as calm as ever as the middle-aged man raced forward. A slight smile appeared on his face, and he was about to step forward when Chen Fan held his arm in front of him. Elder brother Li, my junior brother is young and insensible. Please give me some more face and don't take offense. Let's just drop the matter. Having said this, he clasped Meng Hao's shoulder and gazed at him warmly. Listen to elder brother, he said. When the 4 words entered Meng Hao's ears, they were filled with a gentle warmth that he hadn't experienced in a very long time. He looked into Chen Fan's eyes and then nodded. He stopped, glaring coldly at Meng Hao before looking back at Chen Fan. Slowly, his face relaxed. A long moment passed, and then he said, You need to help your junior brother learn not stop overestimating himself. If he doesn't, he'll end up a mutilated corpse sooner or later. He flicked his sleeve and began to leave. Zhou Shanyu smiled mockingly and followed, along with the other solitary sword disciples. We'll wait for you up ahead, came the voice of Li. You have the time it takes an incense stick to burn to catch up with your junior brother. As they disappeared into the distance, Meng Hao looked hesitantly at Chen Fan. Elder brother, You don't need to say anything, said Chen Fan, his face covered with a wide smile. He embraced him warmly again. Laughing happily, Chen Fan looked Meng Hao over, eyes filled with excitement because of their reunion. You've grown up big and strong, I see. Haha, you're not the little scholar you used to be. In a voice as earnest as it had always been, he grabbed Meng Hao's arm and said, Can you believe it? Here we are, fellow brothers who have run into each other yet again in the southern domain. We have to celebrate. Come, tell your elder brother what you've been up to these past years. A while back, I heard that the state of Zhao disappeared. AI. He didn't even give Meng Hao a chance to respond. His personality had always been like this. He talked, and before long, enough time had passed for an incense stick to burn. The entire time, Meng Hao didn't have a chance to even say a single sentence. It was just like it had been back in the Reliance sect. Chen Fan was definitely long-winded, but even were he more so, Meng Hao wouldn't mind. Meng Hao's heart filled with warmth as he realized that everything Chen Fan was saying was out of concern for him. He was considerate, excited, and happy. That fatty Li Fugui, do you remember him? He used to follow you around all the time. Well, he's a pretty important person in the Golden Frost sect now. Last time I went with Master to pay a visit to the Golden Frost sect, I saw him swaggering around. He's definitely a darling of the sect. If anyone dared to mess with him, a crowd of Golden Frost sect disciples would instantly rush to help him. Junior sister Sue is in sore straits, though. The only thing I could do was ask some people I know in the Black Civ sect to watch out for her. She's been stuck at the 9th level of chi condensation for years now. She needs a foundation establishment pill. In the past years, I've performed some meritorious services for the sect. I think it won't be long before I can get a foundation establishment pill from Master to send to her. Oh, and then there's Wang Tengfei. You'd best not provoke him again. He has an impressive amount of power backing him. Oh, right. You wouldn't believe the latest gossip. Rumor has it that his fiancée, Chu Yuyan from the Violet Fate sect, is intimately involved with some stranger. The news is out and all the sects have heard about it. There was an eyewitness who saw Chu Yuyan wearing the clothing of some other man. There was obviously something shady going on. Who do you think that guy could be? Whoever he is, I sure admire him. He was able to steal Chu Yuyan right from under Wang Tengfei's nose. Meng Hao wasn't able to get a word in edgewise. When the topic of Chu Yuyan came up, a strange expression suddenly appeared on his face. So, he thought, that Zhou Dea fellow did exactly as I predicted and immediately began to spread rumors. He gave a dry cough, not admitting to anything. Instead, he said, "Wow, that guy really is amazing. I hope I have a chance to meet him someday and maybe be friends." His face was covered with an expression of admiration similar to Chen Fan's. About this time, the clear sound of a sword could be heard ringing out in the air. Meng Hao looked up to see a solitary sword sect disciple off in the distance, clearly urging them to hurry up. Taking advantage in the break in Chen Fan's dialogue, Meng Hao scratched his head and said, "Elder brother, maybe you should." Before he could finish, he was submerged by more words from Chen Fan. "Little junior brother, have you found a suitable beloved yet?" he said suddenly. Meng Hao stared in shock. Chen Fan's question seemed to have come completely out of the blue. Before he could respond, Chen Fan nodded. "Oh, I understand. You're still hung up on elder sister Su. Junior brother, listen to me carefully. There are a lot of female cultivators in the southern domain, but there are 4 who are considered to be the most dazzling. Chu Yuyan is one of them, but you might as well forget about her. She belongs to Wang Tengfei and that other mysterious guy. However, the other 3 are really a match for your good looks and cultivation base." Chen Fan's eyes shined brightly as he looked at Meng Hao. He sounded almost like a matchmaker. This topic completely exceeded Meng Hao's powers of prediction. He stared blankly at elder brother Chen. How could he have imagined that after all these years, elder brother Chen would suddenly have taken up this new interest? Meng Hao cleared his throat a few times. "Elder brother, don't be so shy. Look, your elder brother has a lot of experience. There may be some things you don't understand about this kind of thing, but don't worry. I'll take care of everything. There's still plenty of time, plenty of time." Plenty of time, plenty of time. Beads of sweat broke out on Meng Hao's forehead. "All right, you come with me to the solitary sword sect. When we get there, the 2 of us can have a proper reunion." Not even giving Meng Hao a chance to refuse, Chen Fan grabbed him and made to leave. "Elder brother, this. Listen to your elder brother, okay? Besides, pretty soon one of the 3 great clans, the Song clan, is going to have a big get-together. They've invited chosen and Dao children from all over the southern domain. I'm going, so why don't you come along? It will be a good chance to meet some of the current generation of chosen from the southern domain. You just stick with me, and I'll arrange everything." The state of Zhao is gone, and the Reliance sect is no more. Throughout all these years, what I've worried about most is you. A few years ago, I sent someone with a message to find you, but by that time the state of Zhao had disappeared, and I feared that you had been killed. Let us not bring that up. Little junior brother, even now what concerns me most is still you. He looked at Meng Hao earnestly. "You're on your own without a sect. That won't do. You listen to your elder brother, okay?" Meng Hao's heart filled with warmth that spread out throughout his whole body. Unable to make himself refuse Chen Fan, he slowly nodded his head.